Perdón.
Yes, hi, welcome. We'll be starting up in just a few moments. Thanks everybody for joining us.
పడిపోతావు పడిపోతావే ఉండకుండా అయ్యో అయ్యో ఎక్కడికి వచ్చింటావు
We're starting up in just a few moments. Thanks everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is our second session of our virtual training, Quarter 4 Fundamentals for Administrators and Developers. Really appreciate everybody joining us today. We'll be starting up in just a few moments.
Hey, hi Seth. Since people are joining, I have a question.
Yes.
The thing is that I told you, right, yesterday I was not able to attend the full session. So when I was doing the challenge, it was said that we have to load the data for CA cities and US cities. How can we do that? Because people are not there. Can you tell me? We can use this time.
Yeah, we're going to go over the lab in just a moment.
Sorry, is this?
We'll go over the lab in just a moment.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us. This is our second session of Incorta 4 Fundamentals for Administrators and Developers. We have a lot of folks joining us on the line, and there are folks who registered for the course, and there are folks who are joining us who haven't registered for the course. If you have registered for the course and are enrolled and received an enrollment rate, that's very good. For everybody else who hasn't received an enrollment rate but had some link to the virtual session that we're holding today and shared with you, you should put a note down, if you can, in the course player. And essentially what I need and what I'm referring to here is just a nice, easy way here in the comment saying that you don't have access. You should share with me your email here. So I'm going to add a column G. This is email for the non-enrollees. Okay. And that gives me the opportunity to figure out, at least with the managers who shared enrollment emails, how to best serve you. Well, please put your email, your work email down for that. We'll come up with a plan internally. Otherwise, your student account will be disabled that we have here on our tenant. And I know that's an unfortunate situation. It's just because we have planned resources for these trainings, and we have multiple tenants using the servers. And also, yeah, that's the primary reason. So we just have to be very cautious of our resource allocation because we've made prior commitments to customers. We give access to our tenants to students for up to 2 weeks, which is good news for everybody who's enrolled and who hasn't yet completed a lab as we begin here on our second session. Right. So please you can put your stuff down here. If you send it to me privately, I'm just not going to be able to chance. I'm just going to use this sheet. And if it's not here, there won't be an opportunity for me to send an email or share this with other folks internally here at Incorta and with some of our partners with enrollment. So I just need for you to do that. Otherwise, without that information, the decision will be made without your input, unfortunately. So that's what we have to do here in Incorta. And anyhow, I'll speak to that at the end of this session. But that'll be really helpful so that you have some input and I can make an informed decision about how best to proceed. Okay? Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate everyone else's patience who did do enroll and went through our standard process. And, you, of course, will be prioritized in this process. Okay, everybody. So we have a lot to cover. We're a little bit behind, but it's not too bad. The first of which I think we're fine. We had a homework assignment, so I'm going to speak to that in just a moment. We also have some questions that people added to the questions tab. I want to review some of those as well. But before we do so, bring to your attention that we do have our first video session that's available here and available for download. So you can see this. It came about 2 hours later. I can't say whether or not it's going to do the same thing. If Zoom will complete this recording within the same time frame. Sometimes, as I said, it's quicker. Sometimes it takes like half a day. But as soon as I receive an email regarding the publication of the video, I'll make it available to everybody. Yeah, no worries. So you'll find that here, and there is an ability to download this file. Any of your types of messages or anything that you do publicly to everyone in the group will appear here. So typically encourage you to do that, especially if it's a question that we're able to answer or address. We'll have that in place. So that video is available. Under our architecture fundamentals, we're asked here to do a lab, U.S. states analysis, United States analysis. And we will review that lab together. I have a solution that's available that I will go over. But I'm not going to do it just immediately right away. We're going to actually do it when we get complete through our guided walkthrough. And then we'll come to a break and we'll do a quick review of the lab U.S. state analysis. I think that will be a good opportunity for us to review that lab. We will have an additional lab that we're going to do, or I'll assign for homework for at the end of this second session. Essentially, again, you can do on your own. It's very similar to U.S. states analysis, but it's going to require that folks actually do a little more what we call schema design work. And that's something that we're going to learn about today in our guided walkthrough as well. And speaking of schema design, our third session is going to consist of really a couple of different things. I'm going to try to get through as much as I can possibly today. With your questions, of course, we'll take a bio break as well, about 10 minutes for this training, somewhere through the midpoint. But our third session that we have lined up, we're going to do an interactive schema design workshop. So I'll add that here. It's listed schema works. Oh, it's already here. Cool. Our schema workshop. So we'll do that a little bit later. I don't know if it's available yet. Oh yeah. So anyhow, we'll do this together. If you want to take a preview look, that's fine. You don't have to do it, but let me make sure I hide some of this good stuff that we do together. And then that will be an interactive session for us all. And it's going to require that I release some content as well. But that's to give you an idea of how to approach development. We're going to do that in our third session. And what I mean by that, from the traditional, we had some questions about this, with extraction, transform, and loading processes in place, as well as thinking about maybe ELT, extract, load, and transform, which that would be my argument, is quite often the case in Incorta, and involving sort of advanced types through a more understanding or deeper understanding of how joins work in Incorta, which I think is really important. Outside of doing the basic calculations, for aggregations and which I think most people have have a really probably solid understanding of how to achieve, at least if you're proficient in something like Microsoft Excel and calculations. Applying that to Incorta is really easy, that existing knowledge, right? We just have a handful of built-in functions for all different types of scalar results, dates, arithmetic, and the like, as well as for aggregation, right? But very common thing. You'll see some of those today using our formula builder, which will get a revamp in our next version, I think, of Incorta, our minor version, release 4.5, which is in alpha right now. Internally, our employees are raving about, so we're very excited about that. But we're going to be just covering what we have here, the latest release, so to speak, of our general availability in Incorta 4.4.1. Okay. In addition to our schema design workshop, I'm also going to do a demonstration tomorrow of how to build out, and it's from an administrative standpoint, will be the latter half of the second session. It's not listed here in our table of contents, but it covers here data load strategies and some of our Incorta administration. I'm going to build out a cluster from scratch for you. So that you get to see this. And typically, I'm still trying to figure out, we have some limits internally, as I mentioned, for resources. We have a large group. So I'll be making a decision about whether or not I can share a lab with folks to do that on their own. It takes about an hour and a half if you're just starting from scratch. It's not because of Incorta. It's just all the dependencies for Linux. And the Incorta part's easy. It's all the dependencies just for clean vanilla Linux that we have. Actually, Amazon Linux too would be the AMI that we would be using for that. So I haven't completely decided whether or not folks will do that on their own hands-on lab. But if you're an administrator, I think it makes sense. Maybe not as a developer per se, but as somebody who has to be responsible for an Incorta cluster environment. Even if you're doing a standalone, I think it might benefit you. So we'll have more to say about that in our third session. Okay, so let's dig in. And again, this is your training, so feel free to ask some questions. You can post them to chat. We also have our parking lot of questions and so forth. But just for time's sake, as we start up again, we're going to dive right into our architecture fundamentals, our guided tour, and we're going to complete what we were trying to achieve from yesterday. And then we'll review the United States analysis lab, which should take us about 20 minutes, and you'll have at least a recording of that. Sounds like a plan. Okay, great. So here we have our loader service, our analytics service, and yesterday, when we were taking a look at these items, we were really focused on exploring our schema, our initial schema that we created. And I shared my schema with you, schema S30 Adventure Works. And I see some folks actually shared their schema as well, which is with other students, which is great. So here I've given permission, edit view to other students. This is what was brought in into Incorta using our schema wizard. And we learned about some of the options for the loader service in Incorta. Yeah, so I'm getting some folks posting some things about problems and link and like. Let me just be really clear. We have a lot of folks joining us who aren't enrolled in this course. And I'll just take another moment to say here, on the student worksheet that we shared, if you're able to access that student worksheet, great. One of the things I want you to be aware of here, if you're able to access the student worksheet and you weren't enrolled in this course, use column G and put your email down. It'd let me know that you weren't enrolled in this course so that I can work with other folks internally in Incorta that we shared enrollment links with to figure out the best course of action to get you enrolled in the course. You need access to Student Player primarily so that you can mark things off as complete and access to our certification exam. It's only possible through the student player. We also have really limited resources, unfortunately, on our server host. So if I know ideally who you are, then you have input in me making a you have input in the determination process whether or not we're able to afford you an enrollment. And that just helps me internally get additional resources, and we might be able to resize our server to accommodate not just this tenant, but all the other tenants that are currently running. You have access to our course tenant for 2 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here again to our schema, right? So that I created. So we were exploring this data as we left off. We were exploring our schema for the AdventureWorks, right? And this is what we call the analyzer in Incorta. One of the things I'll bring to your attention here in the action bar, let me see if I can get my annotation controls in place. Sure. There we go. Into this action bar, we here see exploring data. This is our action bar title. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it doesn't appear, but this one is just trying to infer that, hey, you're exploring your data now from an existing schema. You're not necessarily starting off fresh, creating a dashboard. You do have your ability over here in Save New Dashboard, Save New button to save your exploration as a new dashboard. And we learned yesterday that our default visualization is called a column chart. We're going to start off with that. If you completed the labs, you had an opportunity doing the US analysis and CA analysis to actually build out a lot of different visualizations. And we'll be reviewing those, as I mentioned, momentarily after you complete our guided tour. So the first thing that we kind of left off as was we were reviewing line total, right? So I can use here in the data panel search for any column, and we had our inspector here that showed our preview of our sample data, as well as some definition of the three-part name basically for the column, which is essentially schema, right? The table that we have, and then the name of the column itself. The data type was determined to be a double by Incorta in the schema wizard. And because it was a double, Incorta just inferred that, hey, this is probably something we want to aggregate. It's a measure. If we simply hit plus here in the data panel, it's going to go automatically, because it's a measure, into the measure tray. There are other different trays, and we'll review those in just a moment, grouping and coloring dimension, but these trays can change pretty dramatically for different types of visualizations. For example, there's not a grouping or coloring dimension trays. Those don't exist for a pivot table visualization, right? You'd have pivot table columns or table rows, for example. We also learned that yesterday that when we drag and drop a column, what we see here in our data panel, to one of our trays, what happens is it turns into a pill, and we can open by using the downward arrow the pill properties, which also, by the way, will change based off of our choices based off of whether a column is considered a dimension, or we just have data in format for certain visualizations versus a measure. Different options in the properties menu. And that just takes some familiarity to get used to. And one of the reasons why in the hands-on labs, you build so many visualizations so that you can start to distinguish between the two and understand really the behavior of the analyzer and understand through training how to best react and establish some settings. So let's take a look here. Our first thing I'm going to change here is line total, this property called name. I'm going to change this to revenue, and if you're following along, exploring your schema, AdventureWorks, great. If you're exploring mine, fantastic. And you're searching for line total, right? And we dragged and dropped line total, or we just added it to the measure tray. And now I'm changing this property called name. Yeah, there's some questions here. I'm going to just save here in dashboard. They're popping up in chat. So on your schema, your selected schema that you'll see here in the navigation bar, schema, select your schema that you created. If you don't have a schema, you weren't able to create it, you can use mine if you're a member of the students group, S30 schema AdventureWorks. just simply select that schema, and then the action bar for the schema, select Explore Data. Select Explore Data. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody, for asking. We'll go to line total. We'll drag and drop line total to measure. Perfect. Bring it out, and now we're going to change the property of line total to the name property under the data tab to revenue. Now, we're exploring data, right? But this is an iterative process I'm going through. And one of the things that we just did was modify a property, right? Essentially of this column in the measure tray. And we should realize that whenever we're doing modifications as developers, right, if there's an ad hoc insight on a dashboard, that's fine. But for manageability and maintainability, setting these types of properties or overriding their values, and if I had to do this for hundreds of insights on hundreds of dashboards, that's just not practical, right? So keep that in mind. This is just showing or illustrating how you can edit these properties, at least at this point of our guided tour, but it wouldn't be a better practice for manageability and maintainability of our insights, right, for various dashboards, especially if reuse is our main goal, which often it is, right? When we're implementing a semantic layer within an organization to encourage data veracity, data truth, right? The organization can be data driven. So, okay, the next thing that we're going to look for is, and I'll just type it here in our canvas essentially for the visualization. We have a title. I'm just going to say this is going to be revenue by category and state, province. Right. So this is going to be essentially my analysis that I'm putting together, at least initially explore. What is my sales revenue for this company, AdventureWorks, which is an outdoor explore the outdoor retailer, and also online store. So I'm going to look for state, and I'm going to use search to help me to get through all the various, right? There are 30 tables in the schema. So search is going to come really in handy in terms of trying to understand or find a column, right, when I'm exploring data. So I've typed in this keyword here, state, and I'll see here that I have a table called state province. And then as I go down, notice I only have one measure. Now, whether or not this should be a measure or not, I'm not going to be concerned about right initially. But it's nice to see that, at least Incorta made some distinction. Typically, probably as a schema designer, I'll go back in our schema manager. I'd say, you know what, this probably doesn't need to be a measure. Territory ID is probably serving as a foreign key reference, but Incorta thinking it's an integer, right, as a numeric type, says, hey, I'm going to make that a measure by default. But it's really not the end of the world if I use this as a dimension internally, so it's not a big deal. But here under state province, I have country, region code, and I have name or state province code. And this is where this inspector is going to come really in handy, opening up the preview window where I can see here the sample data, right? And you can see I have some Canadian data here. I have some states in the United States, and actually there's some data for around the world. So at least initially what I'm going to do is this is the field that I want. Now notice that this column is unfortunately labeled with the value name. So I'm going to drag and drop, and I'll pause a couple of moments here, just momentarily. So I'm not too sure. There's a question here in chat. Done button was disabled when we tried to add two tables in schema. Is that expected? Not too sure what the full question is. So what I would encourage you, if you're not following along, to follow along. Cancel what you're doing. Go into your schema exploration and join us with our guided tour, and just add these specific columns that we're doing. I think that will help a lot. Okay, so I'm going to take a look here. Name from state province. I'm going to select add, and by default, this is going to go to the grouping dimension, right? It's going to go to the grouping dimension. And here I can see all the various state names and the sales that are being listed below. Now, name is not that descriptive for my business users and analysts, right, who are going to consume this dashboard or insight potentially. So under name, I'll open up the properties menu, and here I'll see under the data tab, right, this property that is called name, and the value here is name, and that's certainly not that helpful for me, at least in terms of description. So I'll type in state province. State province. You'll see below here, state province has been, been added. I added state province. Now let's look for the other one is category. So I'm going to search here again in the data panel, category, and we have here product, product category, and so forth and so on, security rules and category and so on. So we have a lot of different sort of options or tables that have been listed here. Under product category, the name of the table, I again have a field or column named name, right? So if I inspect this, unfortunately, I get the right data, but you can see here that I'm already, by exploring this schema, importing it in the Incorta, I'm beginning to notice something. I'm going to add name here. By default, that gets dragged and dropped here to, or added, I should say, to the grouping dimension. And it's the second dimension in grouping. Before I get confused about what it is, in its properties menu, so I'm going to select the downward arrow and open up the properties menu. I'm going to edit under the data tab, the name property, change the value to something meaningful to me, and that's going to be category. All right. I'm all going to click here just to save my work in the action bar in the top right-hand corner. It's because I'm exploring data. It's something called Save a New Dashboard. I did this earlier, but that's fine. We'll save a new dashboard. Now, some of us might be asking, well, what happened to that category that we were looking at before? It's in the grouping dimension. So this is kind of a cool thing that Incorta automatically supports. Some people will call it a drill down. It's really just adding a filter in this case to the current visualization, but it's a drill, what I would call, or more traditionally called a drill through. Essentially, you can click now on any one of these chart bars from this column chart visualization, the largest being sales in California. We're a little biased here. That's where I reside. So anyhow, I'm going to click here on California. We do have about 45 million people in the state of California at this point. Our 2010 census data may say otherwise. But here we go. Let's click California. And you can see here a couple of things that are happening to this visualization on our dashboard. Right? All I simply did in exploring our data was click the button Save Dashboard. And now I am seeing a visualization that's showing us my second grouping dimension, which in this case was category. And that's what I see here being listed, category. So I have accessories, bikes, clothing, and components. And these are the sales as they've been filtered for state province in California. You can go into an insight, and we'll do this together. We're going to select the pen right here, this little area of an insight, what we call these visualizations on the dashboard. This is essentially our action menu. We have three options here. The first is to allow us to focus on this insight alone, which can be very helpful. I have numerous insights on a dashboard that I want a user to navigate through. We can configure it that way versus just having one giant dashboard page. And that's certainly possible. An edit pen that brings me right into edit and a more options menu, which includes edit and focus, as well as other options to download this visualization, print it out, or view it as a table, copy or duplicate it. I can literally copy this insight and paste it onto another dashboard, which is really, really a great feature in Incorta. especially for business users and analysts, not just developers and administrators. I can duplicate this insight on the same dashboard, delete it, and then we'll look a little bit later on. I can set conditions in this dashboard, essentially, that will allow me to receive an alert via email for this dashboard. So we'll explore some of those options from a developer's and administrator's standpoint momentarily. But for us right now, what I'd like us to do is go back and edit. Go back and edit this. And we'll explore this behavior, this filtering behavior momentarily. So I'm going to select here in the action menu, edit, if you're following along. I'm going to move category. It's really easy to do to the coloring dimension. Because at least initially for this insight, I don't need that drill through type of behavior. I might add some other types of drill in or drill through types of runtime filters. Like maybe I'll do something like postal code or the like. But right now, I'm just going to move category back to this coloring dimension, and then to save my changes or my edits to this dashboard. You'll notice the title here now says Edit the Insight. That's what we're referring to, right, in the action bar. And on the right-hand side of the action bar, we no longer have a link that says Save in New Dashboard. We have a link that says Done. And Done is often synonymous with Save, at least in this version of Incorta. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the things we can do with Insights in just a moment. We'll get to bookmarks. Like, thanks for bringing this topic up. I'll select Done. So now I've selected Done. One of the things that you'll notice here is that my previous filter, which is often referred to as a runtime filter, is being applied. So let's just talk a little bit about how the filters work in Incorta. So below the action bar for Incorta, we'll see here, we have really our context bar. And in this context bar are a couple of items that we'll see here. The first of which is known as a bookmark. Now I can add bookmarks if I have a filter. So the ordering is maybe a little bit off. You have to have a filter first, for example. So we'll take a look at the filters in just a moment. Down below is my runtime applied filter. In this case, was for my column that I've given a property, the name property province to. So notice I can remove this filter here in California. I also have the ability to clear all my filters or hide my filters. If I hide a filter, you get this option to toggle. You'll see here some numeric that says how many filters are actually being applied on this insight. So you can clear these out. For example, clear all. And I'm going to actually do that for right now, because I want to go back to my original visualization, revenue by category and state province. That's what I see here, right? Yeah, so somebody's saying here, good question, and I'll pause occasionally. So taking a look here, and thanks so much for asking a question. So the goal is here, hey, can I have like a master insight that gets replicated on other dashboards, right? And as I make changes to that master insight, will it be pushed down to the other dashboards? And the answer is no, not in this version of Incorta. Each insight, it's its own, essentially, object, right? That's going to be featured on the dashboard. Yeah. And so it stands alone. Okay. So, yeah. And I'll take questions as they come up. So I'll pause. Thanks so much. So review by category and state province, right? As we're looking here. So I now no longer have any filters applied. And if I click on something, there's really, you can see here, I can still click on state province and I'm applying this filter automatically. But from there, there's nothing else to do. So I get that behavior, so to speak, by drilling into one of these coloring dimensions, just as it did in a grouping dimension. But we'll see how I can extend the grouping dimension in just a moment. Optionally, too, you'll notice that for our essentially for our legend, right? In this case, our category legend that we have in place here, accessories, bikes, counting, components. I can click on these legend labels, right? So you can see here, you can filter for bikes, our clothing, our components, right? So here I have in components like I have no data to show, so, right, for this reason, but what the access so, as well, so these types of interactions. I'm just going to show real quickly the focus. So you can take a look here at the focus in the action menu. So once again, it's not really obvious, but let's select focus here, and you'll notice that the action bar basically gives me a drill down path. Well, it's not a drill down, but a focus path, like a breadcrumb, saying this is from my AdventureWorks dashboard, and you're looking at the insight revenue by category and state province. And it's one of one. So if I have multiple insights on this dashboard, and we will momentarily, we'll have one of one, you can navigate between these, right? So on the insight itself, revenue by category and state province, just take a look here at the icons that go up in the action menu. The first of which is this outline icon. So you'll see here I have one insight, and it's listed here, revenue by category and state province. If I have multiple insights, there's a whole outline here, and I can navigate with these arrows up and down, left and right as well. I have some style settings that I can apply. I want this to be, as a user viewing this, logarithmic or add values, right? Or I can change my rotation and my labels, whatever I might want to do. There's just a handful. Again, you'll find very quickly if you're new to Incorta that Incorta doesn't offer pixel perfect type visualizations. That's not our strong suite. You can still use those tools like Power BI or Tableau, or those types of visualizations or dashboards if you need a pixel perfect layout and things like that. And you can reset these back to their originals. So there are some configurations for individual users, what they can do based off the insider visualization, right, as we're going through. Okay, I'm going to go back and edit my insight. And I want to show real quickly a couple other things here with this grouping dimension. So I'm going to search for postal code, and if you're following along, that's great. So I'm going to add here another dimension, and this is going to be my click-through path, so to speak. So postal code, and then I'm going to search for subcategory, name, just to demonstrate sort of this behavior, as well as customer type. All right, and now I'll select done. In my action bar, save. So we're going to be looking at revenue by category and state province. All right, as we're going through here now, as we go into California, you'll see here I'm applying a filter, California, as we dig through. And now I'm showing all my postal codes. And you'll see here now I have my hydration packs, my customer type, right? So I'm building out this filter for this visualization, right? All of that came automatically from the grouping dimension, state, province, postal code, name and hydration, and customer type. So let's just take the moment here and we'll take a look at what's going on with the analyzer, but and how it works. But really, one of the things that we mentioned here in our process of working with in this guided tour is working with Incorta is going to be an iterative process, right? As you'll see as we do in our schema workshop in tomorrow's session, right? And why we're doing this in tour, so to speak, is because we're going to have to make some decisions about how we implement things like a semantic layer in calculations, as you'll see momentarily. And going through the process of building a visualization in that regard is going to help us make decisions as schema developers where we implement our semantic layer, where we implement runtime calculations, or as inferred by some of the questions that are listed here, where we can create persisted computed, or what are sometimes referred to as derived columns, which all will relate sort of in a roundabout way to our process that we're trying to handle with structured data for ETL or ELT. Right? We don't have any sort of quote unquote scripting mechanisms that you can put into place, right, that are going to work with, like, such as some level, like a shell script or something, or awk or set or something that is put in place. But we do have some more advanced forms for analytics transformations or engendering data that we're going to touch on. And also some approaches to denormalizing data that we can use that actually are dependent upon the analyzer tool. So bear with me if you have questions about ELT. We're gonna cover those topics. But working with Incorta and understanding the process and the data flow, and actually using the visualization tool is critical, because there's something actually called an Incorta table that we'll talk about later today. Yeah, just hold in and along with us. So here in the context menu, now that I've applied all these basically these filters here, I can add something called a bookmark. And add a bookmark here is a great feature. It allows me to name what these filters are, whatever they are. So I'm just going to call it my bookmark right now. And I can set this as the default bookmark. So when it's opened, this bookmark is being applied, but I can also share this, make it public, right? So other users of my dashboards can use my bookmark settings, right? So this can be very important. Although we see this a lot with financial analysis, right? People are doing quarterly bookmarks and alike, and they're sharing those, okay? So anyhow, you can say add and add a bookmark. So here you have your bookmark menu that you can see. Right, so if I'm going to close here this dashboard, I'm actually going to go back to my content tab, and in my navigation bar, it will show me all my dashboards that I have available to me. I actually delete the legacy one, I don't need it. And I'll go here to my Schema AdventureWorks dashboard 1. Now, before I do, we didn't look at this earlier, but I can favorite the dashboard, and this will put it here in on my content page, or what sometimes is known as the catalog, in the favorite section. Favorite. Yeah. And notice here I have my bookmark is still being applied. Now, next to my bookmarks in this context menu, I also have a filter and search. Remember, search is really big. So let's take a look at our filter. The first thing to notice, based off my changes to my visualization, customer type, right, was the name of a column was coming up. And so that I can see I have I or S, but here I have name, name, and name. Then I have postal code. 3 of these 5 filter fields, 3 of them have the same label, unfortunately, all called name, right? Now, as a business user or consumer of this dashboard, this could be confusing. I look at name, and now I can see at least some of the options these are, and maybe infer what these things are, such as bike racks or bike stands or the like. These probably are some types of categories of products, right? And this right here, names of different places from Alabama to Corsair or Court d'Or, whatever it might be, right? England or so forth. But these are names of places, right? And then these seem to be, again, product categories. So this semantic layer that's coming from the schema that we use the schema wizard to help import into Incorta isn't very user friendly, would be the suggestion, right? But we're going to fix that. So that's our schema, at least initially here, we're going to look at, right? For this name, is coming from our underlying schema. Field labels or column labels that we're seeing here. And it's introducing ambiguity, which is never good with data analysis or descriptive analytics. Next to this is search. So if I search for like bikes, right, immediately we'll see here those same column labels are appearing. So road bikes, I'm seeing a road bike, right? So things that are under name, that's helpful, right? I can find sort of maybe what I'm looking for. I just might not know what it is. Like, oh, okay. All right. So where are we at, right? So through this process so far, all we really started to do is we use a connector to a MySQL data source. We used a schema wizard to the schema. We loaded our data a couple of different ways. We did a full data load. We did a load via staging. We did a load with performance optimized turned off, and then back on again from staging, right? We got our data, a direct data map for the schema. It's in our analytics service in-memory engine, so to speak, for this modern data warehouse. And in Incorta, we're exploring that data using Incorta. Now, one of the things I want to bring to your attention while we're doing that, right, as we're taking a look here, let's go back one more time into edit. And I want to go, in this case, to our measure tray to essentially the line total pill. In this case, what I want to show you is something different that we changed, remember, line total to revenue is the name property. Move over from the data tab all the way over to the advanced tab. All the way over to the advanced tab. We can do this for any measure. And let's select query plan. Once again, under revenue in the properties menu on the advanced tab, select query plan. And this is a real differentiator, right, between Incorta and other traditional databases and traditional data warehouses, or even NoSQL type databases or new SQL type databases. I come from a previous startup called MemSQL, which is was a company. There are lots of the companies like this in sort of modern databases, data warehouses that are massively parallel processing and have distributed database partitions. And even in those modern systems, right, we have distributed database partitions. They have to do things what they call reshuffles or broadcasts. This is actually part of Spark. It does the same thing, and it's clustered, distributed topology for queries, right? And we'll talk about Spark later on. But those systems have to move data around, especially when there's a lot of joins. And this is one of the big differences with Incorta, right? We have this transactional detail coming from this basically OLTP system, right? This AdventureWorks database, right? OLTP being online transactional processing. And you know, we look at this join path that we see here, or this query plan that's in place, right? Just for this basic visualization. And you know, there's a lot of complexity here, right? From sales order detail, where we have from line total, we're able to get through to our categories, our product categories and our subcategories. So we can do these groupings, right? By these, essentially these other tables of all our sales order detail. Same thing, I can go all the way up to the sales order header and then do groupings by address or state, province, and the like, right, for the postal code. And these types of queries, right, that you see right here from the OLTP, this amount of join complexity in an OLTP situation, right, would really burden that type of database, right, and would really require optimization that Incorta just handles for you completely, right? Where I don't have to worry about any type of table statistics that need to be updated. I don't have to worry about the query optimizer having the right statistics or cost-based estimates, right? Whatever the heuristics need to be. Having this complexity of the number of joins, I don't have to worry about performance, right? We're in-memory optimized, right? So I'm just basically getting all this complexity of a query plan, and I'm having instant insights, essentially in milliseconds, right, within Incorta. And that's unparalleled. Right? Even in modern USQL systems and so forth, or even data virtualization, it's really hard to do. Right? But Incorta just does it automatically for us. I'm able to search or filter, slice and dice. I don't have to denormalize my data into a star or snowflake schema. Incorta supports that, right, if you want to do that. But that's really, if you think about the history of SQL, right, is really why folks went to OLAP, right? Why the industry went to OLAP, because of the complexity of the join. Incorta is able just to handle that. Right? And if you're able to have the numerous joins and you don't have to add query hints or build or rebuild indexes or always updating table statistics or worry about query plans getting invalidated all the time, right? You don't have to go to a star or snowflake schema. I'm not saying don't do that, but really that's where a lot of ETL, ELT comes into play, right? The whole idea that you have to have a big fact table. The reason you're doing that, all those pre-aggregations and coming up with the dimension tables to describe that fact table is because you're trying to avoid joins. That's it, right? You're limiting the number of joins in the star and snowflake schema, right? That's why they're in place. That's really the only reason why you have OLAP. I mean, folks can argue day and night about it, but really it's about eliminating join pain queries, right? That's what star and snowflake schemas do. Get one big denormalized table and just a couple of tables that describe that big fact table. And all you're trying to do is essentially eliminate a lot of join pain. And Incorta can really handle that very well. We're going to come back to the query plan, but I just wanted to share that simple visualization, right? Using all these tables, right? And Incorta just handles that for you. You don't have to add any query hints and you don't have to worry about performance. Okay, so we're going to select done here. We're going to select done. All right, so this couple of things that take away just by exploring our data. The first is sort of this semantic layer that we have in place that came from our schema detection here. Now, Incorta offers us a way to simplify this view. Let me just add this actually to the same tab. A little crazy. There we go. To simplify a schema for a business user. Now, we could have done that when the loader service created a physical schema, so to speak, that had less columns in it and so forth. Or in Incorta, what you can do is implement here what we'll call a business schema and offer users business views. And that's a runtime schema on our physical schema that's in memory. So one way to think about working with a business schema is, I might be having a party at my apartment, or so to speak, and there might be 10 or 20 people in the party, right? I don't need to see all the people at once. I just need to see the people through this one window, right, that are maybe in the kitchen, or five friends or family that are there, right? That's the idea. I don't need to show everybody everything all at once. There might be a lot of plumbing and so forth. I don't need to get into all that complexity. I can simplify it and just show them what's happening in one room, right, through the window. That's the idea of implementing a business schema in this place. And that can help us dramatically in terms of simplifying and what a business user sees, and also at the same time, essentially implement a semantic layer. And we're in desperate need of doing that, primarily because what I can see here so far, just immediately from this visualization, I have name, 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 and name. So let's do that. In our navigation bar, you'll notice that we have a tab called Business Schema. I'll click Business Schema. So even if you haven't created the initial schema, again, you have access to mine, which is S30. I remember here, S30 Schema Adventure Work that I built using the Schema Wizard yesterday. So under Business Schema, the navigation bar, Business Schema, select that tab. Now in the action bar, in the plus new or add new menu, so let's select plus new. We'll see here, we haven't updated this, but maybe the mislabeling here, it says create schema. Probably should say create business schema. That's okay. We have some of these imperfections. You're going to get that with a 5-year-old, 6-year-old startup that's iteratively improving its software about every 2 or 3 months. There's a prioritization in place for UI, but the good news is we have some UX designers that are on board that are excellent. They're making some great changes. We have a great front-end team. So these things will change. It's just an anomaly. Don't fret about it. When you select here, create schema, you're going to see the properly named dialog. The dialog says new business schema, so you know you're in the right place. Also, your tab of the navigation bar is highlighted, as you can see here, by the white line. You're in the right place. We're going to call this, we're going to use the same naming convention. I'm going to say who I am, my student user S30. And then just to keep our heads right, underscore business schema. The reason I use underscores is because you can't have spaces, right, for these names. You can't have spaces. And I want to be able to read it a little bit easier than I so to speak, to just using basically camel. But whatever your convention is, but I'm going to call it BZ for business schema. And this is for AdventureWorks. And, you know, I'm going to describe right here my view into the AdventureWorks, what my analysis really would be for business users, right? What that window is, like the kitchen window versus like maybe a dining room window or the like. So what I'm going to call this is AdventureWorks. I'm going to call this sales. And I'll share that in chat if you want to follow along. But use your business name. Name here. Everyone. Yeah, if you want to do something like that. So replace S30, replace with your ID. Okay, perfect. That's what I entered in there. Sales analysis. Pretty straightforward, right? Give it a description, select great. Okay, so once again, for those of us who are following along, right, business schema, and the plus new in the action bar, and the new business schema dialog, enter a name for your business schema. Now, a business schema is going to consist of what we call views, right? Very, very much analogous to what you would create in SQL in a database, create view type DDL or data definition language statement. So we have add new view in a canvas. We'll notice here in the action bar, we can add a new folder, so we can organize essentially views into folders, or we can select add new view. You can have multiple views in a business schema. You can organize them in folders if you like. So here we go, add new view. Just going to click that link in the canvas. This is going to open up our data panel. This is going to open up here a canvas that we can drag and drop columns into, right? There's a title. I'm going to change the title from new view to VW. You can just type, at any point in time, edit this. And just view sales. Hit enter, return, or click somewhere else. So my new view. So how do I get something in the data panel to add to the canvas? Well, here in the data panel, you'll notice next to search is a plus icon. And this plus icon allows us to look at our physical schemas that we have view access to. I'm going to select S30. You're welcome to do this as well. We call this panel the edit panel. It has search in it, but the search is essentially just for a table name, for example, currency, and not a field name. For example, if I look for a column that is called name, nothing will show up. And we know that there are many called names. So anyhow, it's just a search for the table names, which is fine. That can be really helpful. S30 schema AdventureWorks. Select here, done. Nice button at the bottom. And that will close the edit panel. Now I see my whole physical schema AdventureWorks in my data panel. And we're going to start bringing things out just like we did in the analyzer. So, right, so the feature, the functionality that we have in the data panel in the analyzer is really pretty much the same, or at least in this case, this functionality very similar in when we're creating business schemas. So line total. I'm going to select line title. One thing that's missing that we can differentiate from, for example, is there's no plus button, right? There, in this view here, in this business schema designer, right? There's no way, there are no columns, or excuse me, no trays for us to drag and drop into, like a grouping or measure tray. It's just this canvas here. Oh, we have to literally drag and drop out. We do have the ability to preview our data just as we did before. When we were working our analyzer user interface. So this view, you have to drag and drop. Okay, if you want to change the name of the column, you certainly can do that, or you can change the label. You can only have uniquely named columns in a given view. But you can have more than one, you can have multiple uniquely named columns in a business schema if they're in individual views. So if you want to highlight this text box, right, if you try to just like do it with your cursor, you'll notice you're like moving things around. That's so we can change the order of columns in a view. So you can either use your arrow keys or just hold down the shift key, and then you'll be able to highlight the value inside the text box. I'm going to change this to revenue. It's my label. I'm also going to add a description, say, hey, this is revenue is line total, so to speak. Okay, the next thing I'm going to search for, as we saw before, was category. So basically, what is my sales analysis going to be? It's the who, what, where, and when. That's all. So we're going to add the what now. We have the amount or the measure, the line total, and we're going to add category. So taking a look here at category, the what, you see here we have product category, and then we have name. So I'm going to drag and drop out name, product category. Follow along with me here. And the label, I know I'm going to call this category, right? So for the first place, that's going to be a lot more user-friendly. And then we're going to do the subcategory, which happens to be down below. So if I search for category here, you'll see I have name down below. So I'm going to drag and drop product subcategory from the data panel to our view canvas. And then when I do so, you're going to notice here, the previous one is coming from product category. This is coming from the product subcategory table. Incorta is going to say, hey, you only have a unique named column per view that says, hey, it already exists. So I'm going to change the label here to subcategory. I know that's what I want business users to see. And then I'm simply going to change here the name of the column. I'll call this category name, and I'll call this subcategory name. Incorta is essentially forcing me to implement this semantic layer to remove any ambiguity, which is a really nice thing to do, right? Because if I search here for name, how many times name appears in this schema? Many times. Now this comes from, a Microsoft tutorial database, AdventureWorks. It's been around for a very long time. Before that, there was like Northwind Traders, or like if you know that, kudos. But with AdventureWorks, right, with a sort of a three-tier programming or application development model, the idea of having a column that's, that basically was our table called the same thing repeatedly, or a column that's being reused over and over again, made it easier to sort of program those three-tier applications. That was at least initially thinking, but in this type of view, oh my, it's just horrible. Right, so we're going to eliminate all that. So we have product category name, subcategory name, and of course we need the actual what. So we'll search for product. So here I have our product, and I have a product table. And of course, there's something called name. There we go. I'll bring up product. I'll change the column to product name, and I'll change the label. Hold down the shift key to highlight the value inside the text box, product. So that's my what. Let's do the where, right? Can't type in where, but we know it's state province, right? So state province was one that we had before. Again, we had name. I'll bring name from the state province table I'm looking for, state province state. I'll bring that out. And again, I'll change this. Now, the advantage of doing all these changes here, right, is that when we implement a dashboard based off business schema, we're going to inherit essentially all these labels, as you'll see in a moment, and that's going to really help me with the reuse, right, especially with dashboards, any type of editing or the like. I'm essentially introducing a layer between my visualization and the runtime engine. This is a runtime layer, but there's going to be some real benefits to this, as we'll see in a moment. bear with me. One of the benefits is here is in label. So state province, I can now introduce, like I couldn't do that before in the name, right? I can't have a space or special characters over here, right? Incorta will say, no, you can't do that. But for the label, you certainly can. And you can take it to an extreme. Anybody have a favorite emoji? Okay, well, it can be a smiling face with heart eyes. Hopefully that's not offensive to anybody. There you go. Or favorite place. I know we have some folks here. Pyramids. Objects of nature. You can even put some of these types of symbols if you want. I have one for, yeah, you can add some of those. So not that it's recommended to do, or if you wanted to do that, you certainly can, right? So here, for example, I'll add a giraffe. There you go. I just selected those from some website. All right, and I'll select here, done. Now, one of the things is as we're going through this, right, I have line total, category name, subcategory, product name, state, province. One of the things when working with a web application, like I got distracted. I started looking at emojis, right? And if I come back and I accidentally click on schema, guess what happens? I lose all my work that I did for this business schema. So as a matter of practice in the action bar, hey, take a look here. There is a done link. Select done, and this is going to save your changes. So whenever you're working with a business schema, or even when you're building out an insight using the analyzer, get in the practice of saving. So I'm going to do that now before I lose my work halfway through. Done, and get distracted by the emoji dictionary site that I was looking at. Done. All right, so that saved my business schema, which is good. Now I can always go back in, and you'll see here for view sales, here, my emojis and so forth. All right, it's not quite complete. I just have essentially the what in the beginning of our where. So over in the right-hand side of the title of the view, there's a more options menu, and that will give me the ability to edit this specific view. Now, when I go back to edit in my data panel, I've noticed something right away. I see product first, product category, tables, sales order details, state, province. Oh, what happened to all my other 30 tables? They're gone, right, from the data panel. Right? I'm only seeing references to the tables that are listed here in the view. Right? And there are benefits to that approach, right? The simplicity, you know, that's what you put in the view. Those are the tables related to the view. Not a big deal. I can go back in very easily in my data panel, like plus open up my edit panel, and there's my physical schema again. Just like my schema adventure works. Like that. Yeah, I'm going to pause in just a moment and answer some of these questions that I'm seeing in chat. Thank you, Kareem, for asking that question. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I have line, total, category, subcategory name, product name, and state, province. So I want postal code, whatever that is. That's going to help me with the where, some granularity. For that, I can drag and drop that down below, and I can always come and change this a little bit later on. So I have product category, product name, subcategory, postal code. Okay, so I have the where. I wanted to have the who. So I'd like everybody now to look for customer. All right. And here, I might be very much tempted to select customer ID from the customer table. And because this is an OLTP or transactional database, for the most part, that's going to be fine. But I'm actually doing a sales analysis, right? So, I mean, this takes a little more nuanced insight, right, into my schema itself. But I probably would defer to selecting customer ID from my sales order header. And there are a couple of reasons why. So, for example, in our data load process, so I'm going to go back to my data load. Yes, you can do it. Yeah, you can edit your schema after you click done, as I demonstrated. Just go, someone's asking that question. So let me just add my customer ID before I forget from sales order header, and I'll give that explanation in a moment. So I'll select done. And in your header on the right-hand side, next to your column count, is what we sometimes refer to as the kebab, these 3 dots going in a row, and select open. I mean edit from the what is called the more options menu. In this case, it's only one option. And you can go back in. And I'll go back and open up my edit panel and add my entire schema. Like that. So one of the reasons why I select customer ID from sales order header, right, this specific table, is because I'm performing a sales analysis. And actually in our data load process, I could have done something in our schema where I defined a load filter that said, hey, I only want to bring in the past 2 years of my sales order header and sales order detail data. In that case, right? I might have 10 or 20 years of data. These are my largest tables. I just don't, no one's going to be looking at that historical data past 2 years, but I want to create essentially that parquet version of all that data, right? But I just don't want 10 years of data to go into the analytics service, right? Applying a load filter, right? So in that case, I might not have done that to the customer table, so to speak, right? So the customer table might have 10 years of customers in it, but I only have 2 years of sales. But for that reason, I'm going to select customer ID from the sales order header table. Customer type. What type of customer is this? A business user or individual user? I'll select from the customer table. So now I have the who did the buying. I had where they're doing the buying. I had what they bought. I need one more thing, is when they bought. And that's going to be a date. I'm just going to search for date. And date appears here often, again, just like a column that was called name. We have one called modify date is used frequently. So it's not the one I want. There's due date in sales order header, right? There's a lot of these dates here. So just all throughout. So date is probably not a good source. But let's take a look and see if we can see transaction date or sales date. I'm going to do sales. Sales order detail, and then we have, let's look over here. Sales order header, and then finally, it's somewhere here, it's not ship date, status date. Order date. From inventory, sorry. We'll select your order date. Do that. Yeah, that's the date of our order. When this order came. Didn't work. So now I have the when. And I could change that order date or whatever it be. I can reorder these at any point in time. But that's good enough. Now select done of these 9 columns that I've added right here. And notice once I've select done in the action bar, I can explore data. And that's what I'm going to do now. But before I do that, business schema, for those who are following along, I'm going to go here. I'm just actually going to click this link here. Let's just do that. This is a little different. Under actions in the action bar, there's an action menu, which is next to new. There's schema settings. These are business schema settings, even though it says schema settings. Go to sharing, and I'll share this with students. If you just view access. Cool. Okay, so my business schema, I'll click again on my business schema and go in the action bar to explore data. Notice the big difference, right? I just have one view of this complex schema that had over 30 more tables within it, right? And now as a business user, I just have revenue. I like to put my key performance indicators or my measures, so to speak, that will be key performance indicators here at the top. I have revenue, category, subcategory, product, sales, state, province, postal code, customer ID, and so forth. So now real simply, when I drag and drop or add revenue, it's going to go to my measure tray. Notice the label is revenue automatically. I'm going to drag and drop state province. Look at, I have my emoji here and my my giraffe and heart eyes or whatever that is, smiling eyes. And then I'm going to add category. So add category, and I'll bring category down to the coloring dimension. And then if I want to do my drill in path, right, of where I can do postal code, and then product or product subcategory after that, whatever, and then maybe customer type, whatever I want to do, right, I can add all those in really easily. Right? And I can save this in a new dashboard. And I'm not going to add all those other categories because we've seen that for right now. I'll leave it as is, and I'll say save a new dashboard. And Incorta automatically will name this for me S30 Business Schema Venture Work Sales Dashboard, which is fine. Right now, I'm doing this iterative process, right? But over here in the action bar in the More Options menu, I can go to Configure Settings, and that's where I can change the name of this dashboard if I wanted to, and add a dashboard description. So I'll add here Sales Analysis. I'll see that description in the action bar summary. Just click here, Details. Now I have my action bar summary. The sales analysis. Cool. Okay, so I've worked on this this schema, right? View sales, revenue category, subcategory, product category, and so forth. Some of the nice benefits of this, right, is the labeling state and province, right? Category, revenue, all that just is automatically there, right? Really easy for a business user to understand. And so I don't have to edit that for each individual insight on the dashboard. So that's a real advantage when we're implementing a business schema. It's just the terminology semantic layer that's often referred to. Right? The terms that we're using, they're being standardized. So there's no confusion amongst the business community. And that relates to when I am adding a filter. So if I'm a business user and I'm filtering, or I want to search here for bike, right now when I search for bike, notice we're seeing here category. That's the label of the column that I added. And that is also going to be conveyed here in my filters. My filter I have for category and state province. Category and state province. Now, Incorta automatically determines what these filters are, the runtime filtering options, right? How does it do that? It essentially is looking at those dimensions that have been added to either, in this case, the grouping tray or the coloring tray. These two dimensions, and notice dimensions are always in this light blue, where measure is in a dark blue. So Incorta is automatically reading these. So for example, if I add subcategory and postal code to my grouping dimensions, select done, right? We saw before this will add a runtime filter, but it will also expose those here to this filter, category, postal code, state, province, and subcategory. Yeah, we saw in our lab ways to configure that. Yeah, absolutely, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So as we're going through here, right, what we add to our dimensions here can influence what we do in our dashboard, right? I'm just going to remove those two categories just for the moment, like that. Or those two, I should say, grouping dimensions, postal code and subcategory, right? And just demonstrate that behavior. So here's a common technique for BI developers, dashboard developers, reports developers working with Incorta, right? And often one of the advantages of working to Incorta that we can get these we can preserve the high fidelity or the granularity of the transactional detail, and avoiding things like denormalization or pre-aggregations into certain types of snow or star like schema, right? So here I'm going to add a new dimension. So for this given insight, given dashboard, I want to add another insight. I can do that in the action bar that we see here. There's a plus. This allows me to add a new insight. So I'll do this real quickly again. I have just click plus in the action bar of the dashboard. That will allow me to add a new insight. And this insight's going to be different from our default, which was column chart. This one is going to be for that transactional detail. I'm going to select a table. Notice I have a table here. It's a table. You selected the wrong one, don't fret. You can always go back, right? Aggregated, whatever it is. So just select table for this one. In this case, what I'd like you to do is from our data panel for the view sales, just simply either drag or drop view sales, yep, that object, the whole entire view to the measure tray, or hit plus. And what that's going to do is bring out all of these columns under the view to the measure tray. And this gives me that detail tables, that details table. So I'll call this, right, details order transactional detail. And I can change the order of these, right? I can do this as by order date. I can change the order of the bills, no worries. Okay. Like revenue last or whatever it is. So I have category, subcategory product. And I have, you know, maybe the customer, the where postal code, and then the customer ID and the customer type or whatever it is. Whatever order I want to change it. I'm just going to select done right now. Select done. So I have a details insight now as well. And you can change the layout. We'll do that in just a moment, but you can move these around. But what I want to point out to you is that you have, you know, your 9 million rows of detail is showing here in this page configuration. And now when I go in and I search for or filter upon, how did that happen? Category, customer ID, customer type, order date, postal code, product. Well, these are all dimensions, even though they show up as measures in this insight, not here essentially as a grouping dimension. Incorta knows that these are all dimensions categories. See that they have light blue arrows, or if we look here for inspector, these are all dimensions. All these dimensions, order date, customer type, customer ID, product, all of these are now exposed, right, for filtering. That's what we're seeing here. And that's a real nice technique, right? I want to expose essentially all these dimensions. What's one way that I can do it on the dashboard? By adding a details table, right? So that's pretty powerful. So when I select here on my bar chart, California, and apply the state province filter, guess what happens for my details? It also gets filtered. Now I have 1.4 million rows, right? If I add here another search, for example, I want to do postal code, right? This is being automatically filtered to California postal codes. Let's apply. Right? Now there's this for that postal code here in California, 93291. You can see I just have 5,000 rows. So this is very powerful in Incorta, right? The ability to expose these dimensions and allow users now to filter upon those dimensions. Yeah, right. So there was a question that came earlier. What are some of the advantages of working with this business schema? Well, you're going to see some additional advantages, right? This idea of creating a business view, simplifying the complexity of the underlying schema for our business users, implementing a standardized terminology, a semantic layer. That helps with the reuse and maintainability, manageability of these fields in terms of what that terminology is. I don't have to go and for every ended site, right, change the label, the revenue, right? It's automatically being done for me. And then we're going to try to add some calculations to a semantic layer in just a moment. We can see how that works as well. But what I mean by that is, right, I have category, subcategory, product, and revenue. I didn't have to modify these individual, right, properties here under revenue. The name property is revenue. Right? Now, I can see my three-part name from the, in this case that I have, it's business schema, view sales, and what we called that column was line total. The label is revenue, and that's what business users get to see not only in their filters, but also on the dashboards and reports. So that's just a huge time saver for me. It's done. So we're going to add one more insight to this dashboard, and we're going to move that insight. So here in the action bar, plus, this is a different type of insight. When I just want to get one key performance indicator or one metric calculated, this is called a data field. I'm going to select, go down below to a data field. And here we're going to select, in this case, for example, rounded. And notice this visualization as a data field is just essentially one tray, a measure. Well, here I'm going to add, if you're following along, excellent. Take your one measure that you have in View Sales, drag and drop or click plus to this. Okay. And this is now giving me the total for revenue. Now, I said rounded as the default type, but I can change it. For example, format, I could change this to using currency rounded. Now select done. Okay, where did that insight go? Well, it's been added to the very bottom. This very bottom, like the last one that's added. We can change the layout. You'll notice here this sandpaper icon. Oh, and I probably should give this a title. So before I do that, let's go here, go edit. Let me give this a title for this insight. KPIs. I'll select done. Yeah, so next to the title, you'll see here the sandpaper icon. This is going to allow me to just grab, you see it turns into a hand. This is going to allow me to drag and drop this. So for example, I could add this right next to my details. I can also move this around with these arrows. I can move the inside around, or I can use my arrow keys on my keyboard. I'm just going to move it all the way to the top. And then in the action bar where it says edit the layout, click save. Click save. So that's an easy way to edit the layout, move things around. You can also go into the action bar for your dashboard, select edit layout. Cool, so I have my revenue here. Now let's say my business user, I've done this work. I said, hey, here I have the initial schema, business schema for you. I have a metric that you wanted, a calculation of revenue. You can filter on it and so forth. There's 9 million transactional rows. Do you need me to do anything else? And that a business user says, yeah, well, it's great that you got me the revenue. What I really need is cost. So as a developer, right, what am I going to do? Well, I could go back and look at my KPI, and I can see here I have view sales, right? This is my view. Now, I want to figure out what cost is in terms of essentially, is that available in my physical schema? And I do that here. And the answer is yes, right? So in our data panel, you'll notice we have our plus sign, and by default, we're looking at a view, right? This runtime view, our business view that we selected to build this insight off initially. But I can switch here from views back to my physical schemas, my tables, right? And now I can select my physical schema, S30 Scales AdventureWorks. I'm just going to select the whole thing, select done. On my data panel, I have now my business schema and my physical schema. I have both. Right? And that's one of the iterative ways that you can work with in Incorta, right? You're not restricted to just one schema or business schema when you're building dashboards or insights as you're seeing here. So my analyst has said, hey, you want a cost. I'm going to search for cost. That's right here. So I could add here standard costs from the product table, add it here and calculate it, bring it over. And that number looks really small, right? And there's some of this, and that probably has to do because, well, this revenue is coming from, right, a sales order details table, a line total, right, for all the line item, right, for an item that basically consists of a product and essentially cost and what its sale price was. So I actually need to look for that order quantity. And we'll find that order quantity from, as we suspect, our sales order detail table, right? The quantity of the product that was ordered. So I have order quantity. Okay, so now we know that there were 2 million things ordered for those $8 billion in revenue. How do I get these two numbers together? Well, that's called using a formula in Incorta, right? So individually, these numbers aren't going to help me in my data fields, but I can use something called a formula. I'll drag and drop new formula from my data fields measure tray. And here, it's not going to be immediately obvious in the properties menu. Down below, we have a text box that says formula. I'm going to change this to cost test. I'm just trying to figure out what this formula is, so it's just me trying it out. And then simply click here where it says formula in the text box. And this is going to open up our formula builder. Our formula builder. Notice our formula builder has the same schemas in its data panel. Okay? I can also add, again, other views or other tables if I wanted to. I don't need to in this case. Then my schema adventure works. And I have search. So I'm going to search again for costs. So that's standard costs that we see here. And I can just drag and drop, or in the gutter, select plus. So standard cost times, and then we had order quantity. Add plus or drag and drop. Now, notice the three-part name, right? The three-part name in this formula is to the physical schema, right? That's where we're making these selections from. S30 schema AdventureWorks, product standard cost, S30 AdventureWorks sales order, detail order quantity. This three-part name is to the physical schema. Actually, copy that. Let's select that. Okay, and that looks like what I want. Formula test, format. I'll change this to currency rounded. Like done. Now, I have that calculation, but I want to add that calculation that was on this insight to my business schema, right? That's what I really like to do. Maybe at some point in time, there'll be the ability to say, add to business schema this calculation. We just don't have that right now as a feature, kind of a common request, but I did copy this formula. Okay? I'm going to go back to my business schema in the navigation bar, select business schema. I'm going to go to my business schema. Hey, thanks for sharing yours, S8 and S9, S30 business schema, AdventureWorks. Right. On the title of the business schema, I'll find the more options menu, and I'll just select edit. And there in edit, I do. Well, in the data panel, guess what I have? New formula. I'm just going to literally drag this new formula button all the way here to the canvas, just below line total, in line total and category name. I have my new formula. I'm going to call this formula cost. I'll call this cost. And it's actually a line cost, right? We're doing it per transaction row. So it's a line cost. I'll call the name of the column, I'll call line cost to be consistent with line total. I'll call this cost. And then here I have a button. What is it? Is it going to be a dimension or measure? It's going to be a measure. I added the description of want standard cost times whatever. Don't have to do that. If you want it, you can. No, but formula. I'm just going to paste. All right, and this is my three-part name for my physical schema: AdventureWorks product, standard cost, AdventureWorks sales order, detail order quantity. But done. So now I have my formula for line cost. It's in my schema. I'm going to save those. Excuse me, my business schema. I'm going to save those changes in the action bar. So yeah, what's the formula again? I'm going to just share it with everybody here in chat. It and change it. Right, that's using my schema. If you're using your own physical schema, great. Change it appropriately. Yeah, and select done. Yeah, if you have access to my schema, this would work, right? And everybody does. So you can use that formula. Yeah. Okay, so I selected done. So Explore data is going to just bring me to a new dashboard. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to go back here to content. And I do have my Schema Works dashboard, but that's my new favorite is Business Schema AdventureWorks dashboard. Right, that's the one that I'm going to work with. So I'm going to unfavorite this Physical Schema AdventureWorks dashboard and work with my Business Schema one. Yeah, there we go. That makes my life easy. So back to my API data fields insight. I'll select here in the action menu, edit. And now you'll see here in my business schema, I have a new measure called cost. And actually, when I preview what cost is in terms of the sample data, you'll see here my 3-part column name. It says line cost. And here's my formula, how this was derived. You can see my description and measure. I can just simply bring out cost and change this out. Now, I do have to apply my formatting. There's no default way yet in the business schema to determine a default format for that business schema column or field. That would be a nice thing. So that's the only configuration. I know that some people consider that to be a nuisance, but what we have at current state. So select done. So our business analyst has said to us, hey, you got revenue, you got cost, that's great. What do I want? I want profit. Okay, so I'm gonna go, sure, I'm gonna edit this. Again, I wanna come up with a formula for how I can determine profit. Profit would be, essentially is gonna be revenue minus cost. So I can go here in new formula, add it to my measure tray. And I'll call this profit test. We're almost done. We're almost done. We have a couple of things that we need to do, and then we're getting close to our halfway point. Right? Profit test. Yeah. So I'm going to select here our formula builder, and notice I have revenue and cost. So in this case, I can actually use the fields that are defined in the runtime business schema, minus, and select cost. I'll take a moment to look in the chat and review some of the questions. So let me just finish this formula. Line total minus line cost, like done, right? And now I have my profit test. I'll select the format here. Do currency rounded. Okay, and I'll save by selecting done. So the question is how to go to saved business dashboard. So in your content, yeah, take a look here under content. See your dashboards that are listed here. You can toggle here in the context menu between the two. You can also search. So a nice thing is if you're using the prefix convention of your student username or login name, S30, right now I can just see my dashboards, S30. You can also organize your dashboards into a folder. So for example, here under in the action bar, you can add a folder. You could say they're my dashboard, or as you've seen that I've done below, I created one called S30. So here I have an S30 folder as my day, cities, and US dashboards to it. But I can move all my other dashboards that I'm working on if I want. For example, here, I can move these, move this to my third dashboard. I can also create a new folder and then move it to that new folder. So there's lots of different ways to move, right? Move stuff around, make it easier for you to work with. So here under my content tab now, I'm just kind of clearing things up, right? I have some of my demo dashboards, I have my S30 and I have my favorite. And when I go my S30, I still have a favorite. It will always show up in my favorite. Favorites is really nice. Nice way to work with dashboards. Once you find your dashboard, favorite it. Okay, cool. So I have here my profit test, right? This calculation that we did before. All right, I'm going to just go back to my formula builder. And notice that this is being derived from my my view sales, right? And line cost is a calculation in itself. So I'm basically building a calculation off a calculation. So I'm going to copy those. And then in this iterative fashion, I'm going to say select done. I'm going to go back in my action bar to my business. And within my business schema, I'll select my business schema. In the title bar for the view, I'm going to open up the more options and select edit. And I'm just simply, again, going to drag and drop from the data panel. I'll drag and drop new formula right out here below line cost. And I'm going to call this line profit. And as a label, I'll call this profit. This will be a measure. I'll just say revenue minus cost. I'll say the formula. And notice here I have my underlying physical schema, right? So the question is, can I add this three-part name that refers to my business schema itself? And the answer is yes. In my data panel, I have the ability to reference both views and tables in my formula builder. I'm going to select done. So line profit, revenue minus cost, right? I'll select done in the action bar. I'll go back in the content tab, my action bar, select my favorite dashboard. Back in my KPIs insight, in the action menu for the insight, select the pen to edit. You'll see here I now have profit. I'll drag and drop profit out. I'll remove profit test. And I'll change the format in the properties menu to currency rounded. Now, select done. So a couple of things going on here that we can just convey. We have revenue, right, which was our line total being summed. I have cost, which is a calculation, and profit is a calculation. So cost and profit are calculations. If we go back over to our architecture diagram, so these calculations have been implemented, right, first iteratively, right, on the dashboard on the inside itself, but then I sort of cemented these into the business schema in the business view. And these are actually runtime calculations. And developers need to be aware when they're implementing runtime calculations, right? Maintainability, manageability on visualizations is certainly a concern, right? Pushing a calculation down into a business view means we create a standardization of a calculation, right, in our semantic layer. That's really important in terms of data veracity for descriptive analytics, right? Now everybody's using the same calculation, so there's some advantages to that as well. But the reality is we need to be a little more cognizant with this runtime calculation because of the considerations of concurrency. What I mean by concurrency is one or more business users accessing a dashboard that requires that calculation. Right, there are some settings in Incorta that we'll look at a little bit later on in the administration application, Web UI, that allow for us to cache reports and like. But that said, some of these runtime calculations will invalidate a cache. And basically are requiring CPU consumption. Under concurrency, maybe I have, a Wall Street hedge fund, and here in the United States, financial markets, hedge fund. I have 500 portfolio analysts at 6 a.m. log into Incorta to look at what happened the day before, to look at, their near real-time stream of data analytics coming in, and they have these runtime calculations that have been implemented in business views. Not maybe the end of the world, but for every insight on a dashboard, we're essentially spinning up a query thread, right, to get that data from the in-memory engine. Now, when we talk about CPU, right, when we start talking about stuff like CPU, some people's eyes gloss over, some people get excited, right, whatever that may be. Some people get excited by looking at the command line, right, and so to speak. But what we're talking about here, when I show HTOP, which is a basic way that I can look at what's happening on my Linux box and drill down into it, right? I'm talking about CPU, right? My available CPU and the threads that are available for that individual CPU. And when we spin up essentially in a query thread, right, when we're accessing memory, basically that CPU is going as fast as it can to, hit that runtime memory. And that speed is around, for modern chips processors, I would say, and, modern volatile RAM. We are going to the world of non-volatile sooner than later. But for what we have right now, it's about 50 gigs, right? 50 gigs per second, I would say would be at the upper limit. So it's pretty fast, right? You know, even if I have like a half a terabyte of data in memory, you know, depending on my calculation, at 50 gigs a second, you know, for that query thread, probably I'm doing okay, right? Based off of some of my data sizes, right? You know, what we could do, how many rows is that? That's hard to say based off of what those underlying data types is. But that could be, the performance is really fast. So that query thread basically is going to do that, come back, and then process the next, right? But under concurrency, I just may not have enough CPU. So if I have 100 insights on one dashboard, right, and I only have 32 CPU based off of the number of threads or the hyper virtualization that might be on that CPU, I may have to wait, right, for some of those threads to come into place and access the in-time run model. And that wait can be longer if I have very complex calculations in my business views, which I might. It's just something to be aware of. Now, the good news with Incorta, we can actually put these calculations and put the burden of that calculation over into the loader service, right? I can actually define these calculations, in this case, because they're row by row calculations, within the schema itself, right? Now, that process of putting it in the schema itself, right, is very similar to what we did when we were editing our business schema views, right? Essentially, the idea here in my business schema that came into play, right, I had my line total. Let's edit this. For example, I had line cost, this formula. Take a look at this formula. This formula basically says the three-part name, schema, adventure works, product, standard cost, this using or referencing my physical schema. So I'm just going to highlight that right here and select done. And select done again. I'm going to go to my schema adventure works. Now, this schema, I'm going to go into the settings here. I'm going to change this right now from sharing from students to, right, make sure students can only view. Okay, because I'm going to make changes here. I'm going to add that calculation. And the first question is, where do I add it? Right, well, you may recall this type of calculation for cost use two tables, products and sales order detail. And sales order detail by far is the larger table. It's 9 million rows, right? It's one of the largest tables. It's our transactional details. So I'm going to add it here. And the way that I can do that, I can simply scroll down. And you can see here we have a whole section called formula column. I can select here, add formula column, or in the action bar in the add new menu, I could say add formula column. So I'll just click here, add formula column. And I'll call this formula line cost. And I'll call this label cost. This will be a measure. And then click here for the formula. We'll open up the formula builder. And I'm going to paste. VentureWorks product, standard cost. Here we go, order quantity. Click done. Now this is physical schema references. Click done. Now, when I save this change, when I select done here in Incorta, some magic is going to happen. Let's take a look at the magic that's going to happen. So, right, remember, Incorta, I'm just going to grep here for the snapshot files. We looked at this yesterday. Yeah, if you're taking a look. So schema, what am I called? Adventure work. Oh, S30. Sorry, I got this backwards. A little early my time. I'm trying my best here. Okay. So right now, here I have this, my output of all these tables, right? So sales order detail. Let's take a look at that. So I'll add that into my grep statement. Yeah, you're not going to have access to our host machine. So if you're using your terminal, it's not going to work. This is access to my host, the host machine. Yeah. So sales order detail, right? This is running, as we described yesterday, training.incortaops.com. This is the host for the machine. That's what you're looking at. Yeah. So schema, AdventureWorks, sales order details, right? So let's just look here. There we go. Anyhow, I'll just do it that way. That's just fine. So sales order detail. I don't know why it's not showing. Let me try one more time. We just have a lot to look at. So yeah, try that. See if I can make the magic happen. There we go. So that's a subset of these columns. So sales order detail. So here I have, the column, line total, and so forth, everything that was listed here. When I actually hit done after adding this formula, right? When I select done or save, it changed to this. Notice what's going to happen in the action bar. Direct data mapping in progress. The loader service, even though it's not displayed here, right? It builds this in-memory direct data map, and it's going to persist that to our storage layer as a snapshot. And what that means is this is our storage layer, right? Home Incorta Analytics, tenants, July 30th snapshots. Let's look at our sales order detail, right? Wasn't there before. What was the column that we added? It's called line cost. It's a calculated, persisted, what we call a persistent computed column, or derived column, some people also refer to it as. Bam. There it is. It wasn't there before, right? But when I click done, Incorta said, oh, you've made a change to the direct data map. You've implemented this column. I'm going to add it now to my direct data map. It's persisted now down to our storage layer, and magically, it's going to be available to our analytics service, right? So I do LSL. Yeah, you'll see I'll just this here. You'll see the size of this as well, right? It's just not the name of the file, but you'll see actually there's data here. Line total and line cost for new compute column, right? It's persisted to disk. That's really important. So I'm going to go back to my business schema now. And my business schema is, but this is the iterative nature, right? We started working with a formula in the analyzer. We put the formula in our business schema, right? And then we realized that we have to deal with concurrency calculations. I want to minimize the hit on, so to speak, the CPU hit possibly, because I know this is going to be used by, thousands of users all at once. So I'm going to put it into my physical schema, right? Exploration. So here we see line cost, right? So I'm going to go back here and edit. So we have line cost here. Notice when I go to my sales order detail, let me just search for line cost. Line total, and my sales order detail line cost, right? Not showing up. So let's just take a look here. I'm going to add my whole schema back. Schema AdventureWorks, click done. That's cost. So there it is, sales order detail, cost. That was my label, right? So inspect it, it shows line cost, right? I'm going to just literally drag and drop this out, right where the other line cost was. Or it's saying, hey, we can't have two of these things that are named the same. You got to get rid of one. Sure, I'm going to get rid of the one that's my runtime line cost. Let's just get rid of that. I'm going to do the trash can. Say goodbye. So now I'm referencing my physical schema, my persisted computed column line cost. But the name of the column is the same and the label is the same. Right? I'm going to select done. I'm going to go back now to my content tab. Look at my dashboard. In this case, it's S30 Business Schema AdventureWorks Sales Dashboard. And is it broken? No, I still have cost here. So what's going on? Right? Well, cost on this dashboard, right, is being supplied by a three-part name, right? Business schema, the name of the view, and in this case, the name of the column, which is line cost. And because I implemented, right, essentially swapped out from my physical schema something that was named exactly the same as on the business schema, I didn't break my report. Right? There was no breaking of this dashboard. Right? Because I used the business schema as a semantic layer, right, I was able to make these changes and not break the dashboard because my dashboard insight is looking solely for this three-part name. Where it comes from, schema, adventure work, sales order, detail, line cost versus a formula, it doesn't carry. It cares about this column name, the business schema name, the view, and the name of the column that was defined in the view. Makes sense? Now, profit, we'll select done as we come in here. We're almost, just a couple more minutes. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Profit is something we defined on our business schema. So in the navigation bar under business schema, I'll go back to my business schema here, and I'll select edit, review sales in the more options menu. And if I take a look at profit, I'll click here, changing the formula. Remember, this comes from the business schema reference. Now, if I try to change this, right, schema, business, adventure work, sales, view, line, cost, and so forth, right, this is all coming from the defined business schema, right, not the underlying physical table. So it's the business schema itself, right, which you can do, right, which you can do with business schemas. You can reference other calculations in business schemas because they're all runtime calculations, right? Or Incorta will do the work of figuring out the order and precedence of those calculations. No worries. But if I just copy this business schema calculation that references, columns as defined in the business schema itself, i.e. S30 business schema, adventure work, sales, view sales, line total, and so forth. Like that, I copy that. Go back to my schema, and for schema adventure works, S3 schema adventure works in my case, and I try to implement that new formula on the sales order detail table, which I'll select by selecting in the action bar, add new formula. For sales order detail in the action bar, in the add new menu, select formula column. Now I'll scroll down below and I have this option. Yeah, so what is here show an analyzer? Yeah, so that makes it available in the data panel, right? This column. And there are certain use cases where you may not want to expose a persistent computed column. So for example, if you're using it, like maybe you wanted to concatenate a field or something like that that you use in a join, you might not want to show it in the analyzer, for example. So you have that option. So anyhow, I'm going to call this a line profit, right? This is what we call line profit. I'll call this profit, and this can be a measure. Now, when I go to the column formula, here I have my physical schema. I can't access or runtime business schema. So my calculation here is business schema and so forth. If I select done, it's basically not going to work. Incorta doesn't validate this per se, so at least initially, if I click done here, direct data mapping, it says, oh, it all worked, right, so to speak. I'm taking a look at it. Now, the reality behind the scenes, so to speak, in the logs is going to be a little bit different. So anyhow, but if I went here to my business schema, right, and now I go back to my business schema adventure work, so in the navigation bar, select business schema adventure work, sales, and sales, I'll select edit, right, and now I can see here if I wanted to look for profit or something like that, right, I'll see profit. I could drag and drop this out like what we did before and get rid of my runtime calculation for profit, select done. And now that's been done and calculated, go back to content in the navigation bar and open up my favorite dashboard, S3 Business Schema Adventure Work Sales Dashboard. You'll see that profit is not giving me a calculation. I'm back to on my host here. There we go, Incorta node services. So we were talking about these services previously, and if I can't remember which one, just cat your services index, right? And here you can see my loader service is this service. Now, when we're talking about Incorta, I'm going to go into this directory. Right? And we saw this yesterday when I grepped the processes for Incorta. We saw that the services. So just as a reference to that, let me just do that PAUX, and we'll just grep the processes here, which is Incorta node. Incorta node. You'll see that these two services. And one of these is right with this squid, and the other one's the other one. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Sorry. There we go. Right. So 75B2, I believe, is my analytics, and the CAA is the analyzer. But I can. Yeah. So that's what we had. Now notice when we look at these properties, they're Java util properties. Right, we have passing in all these parameters, what's really running, bootstrap jar, so forth and so forth. These are actually, as we look into these processes, we see here a bin and a conf and something, and then something called Tomcat PID. So basically what we're seeing is both of these services are being managed by a web application server called Tomcat. And if I go into the logs for this, yeah, if you're looking for cat services index, right, or whatever, you're not going to see it because you don't have access to the host. I do. This is the host for training that in Incorta Ops. If you cat those things in your terminal, you just don't have any of this installation. I do. I'll talk about that in a moment. So anyhow, I'm in the log files for this service, and here I have Catalina out. And the reason why I'm showing this to you is so you know that Incorta is running as under a web application, right? As a Java server page is like this Tomcat application, and we're tailing maybe the last 100 lines of Catalina out. And if you're familiar with Catalina, right, that's a Tomcat web server log. That's essentially what we're seeing here, so to speak. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is when we did those direct data mapping changes, right, if we come in here and we take a look, we're actually seeing everybody's, right? So there are a bunch that we got put into place. But we'd see some type of error message if I'm looking up here, sales work order header, special offer, we're saving, unexpected exception, creating a formula for a schema. Right? That error for that great calculation projection is here in the log files. It's showing up right here in this case, the schema changes, but this is where we saw our area. Could not add this column, view sales line total, right, based to the sales order table. Okay. So, or this case here, unmanaged column, line profit, there we go, column, right? Here it came there. So I was looking at something before, it was a warning, but here's the error that came into place. So the log files are captioned. This is important. Yeah, we're going to have a break in just a minute. Yeah, thanks for mentioning this. I just wanted to get to this point here where we have these log files, right, that essentially show us, or Catalina log files for an administrator or developer, show us where the things are broken. Yeah, so that's what we're seeing in this place. So we are at a good halfway point to take a quick break. And then we have about 5 more minutes of this walkthrough. So I was going to push through, but let's take a break. People are asking for it. So we'll take a 10-minute bio break. Thanks, everybody. A reminder. I'll take a 10-minute bio break. I'm going to pause the recording and pause sharing my screen. Okay, thanks, everybody. 10-minute bio break. God, thanks, everybody. So where we left off, yeah, hey, great. couple of things. I know I asked folks as we're doing this just as a reminder, if you were not enrolled in this course and somebody shared with you a meeting invite, I have a list of those folks there who are added, and I've asked you, please put something here for the non-enrollment email, so I have some way to figure out with the folks that we shared enrollment links with how to best proceed to enroll you in this course. If you're not able to do that, to add your email for non-enrollments, make it a little bit better. You're not going to have a say in what we do. So please put your email if you can on the Google Sheet link that specifies, especially if you're not enrolled in this course. I have a list of who's enrolled. It's in our system. That's why we use that to gate this. I'll just share that link here again. So column G, add your name. Otherwise, we're just not going to have, don't know in terms, you won't have a say into the decisions that Incorta makes about your enrollment in this course. If you've already enrolled, the normal process, you've got in your access to the course player, great, awesome. But if someone shared a link with you, say, hey, attend this virtual meeting and so forth, and you don't have access to the course player, and you think you should, OMG, put your email down. I shared that with you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Otherwise, I just have no. You just won't have an insight in what the determination or next steps of actions will be for you. Typically, what will happen is we disable those student user accounts that you have. So yeah. So please add it there. Thank you. So we were taking a look here. We're finishing off in our guided tour. I was showing you using profit. I did a calculation that referenced runtime, right? I put here down in our schema, in the logs, the Catalina logs for the service, right? We see here that the error exists for profit error. Hey, the requesting unmanaged column, this won't work. Schema is updatable, blah, blah, blah. That's where we see the error that's referencing more or less this calculation that was on the loader service for line profit. And the reason we see that error is because we're referencing a runtime in the analytics service calculation, right? It's not going to work. The UI at this point in time just doesn't tell us that. When we're working here on our schema, that would be nice. We're just not there. It's just one of those inconsistencies or anomalies that you're going to find. Anyhow, so we need to change this. It's obviously not working, so I can simply go back in and change this. And what that's going to change to is I have to have line total, right? Line total is this calculation here. Right. So it would be great, right, if I was able to go through and just say, hey, line total, and reference right here our sales order detail, right? This calculation, right? That's fine. That's our line total, I should say, that we have. So I need to replace that. Excuse me. Let me add that. Yeah, I'm getting a little noisy. So, all right. So we have line total. So that's my schema. Right, physical schema column reference, it's fine. But here, what I was talking about, line cost. Line cost is a calculation. I'm going to say done. Now, line cost is listed here right above. It'd be great if I could reference that line cost, right? We'll search for cost, but you'll see here it's not showing up. Because this calculation happens at a different stage of when data is being loaded in our direct data map, i.e. it's a persistent computed column, it's a derived column, it's in this case, it's using other fields, right? It's not accessible, it's not exposed to me. So I can't, there's a little cost of reusability here, right, that I lose when I put calculations into my physical schema that schema designers needs to be aware. So what I'm really looking at is this question here, sales line cost. In order to replace it, I actually have to do the formula again if I say done. What I mean by that is I need this formula from above. I need standard cost times order quantity. So I'll select that, copy it, and go back to this formula and literally replace this within parentheses, right? So minus this cost, like that. Now when I select done, behind the scenes, right? You can see here in my Catalina file, hey, here are my schema changes. I've updated my schema, right? I'm seeing here that's associated with this, right? So that change has been made. Go back over to my content. I don't need to change my business schema. Go back over to my dashboard. Now I have profit. It works, right? So when working with the business schema, I can reference other column. I can reference other formulas, right, really easily, right, so to speak, in that, because it's a runtime calculation, but that have been already computed in additional computations. But when I'm working with the physical schema, I have to go back and be very explicit about working with the columns in the physical schema and the calculations on those columns. I just don't get that sort of reusability that I do in the business schema. So that's the trade-off. So here's our final challenge that we have, and then we'll wrap up our guided tour, and we'll do a quick review of our homework that we had. So I'm going to go back to my content tab in the navigation bar for my business schema adventure work sales dashboard. And we're going to take a look here at a third measure that we have. So our business analyst is saying to us as an administrator developer, hey, this dashboard's looking good. You're giving me revenue, you're giving me cost, giving me profit. I would like to get and show here under KPIs, and we'll put this to everyone, the formula. I want to show percent revenue, profit as a percentage of revenue. So add a KPI that shows profit as percentage of revenue. All right. We're all just going to take a moment. I'm going to pause sharing my screen while we do that. So take 2 minutes. Take 2 minutes to do this. Work with a colleague, work with a friend. Take 2 minutes to do this. That's above. Okay. All right. I'll pause my screen. Resume the recording. How many folks got this? How many folks got this big number? Yeah. Oh, hey, Rohan, thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Yeah. So what's going on? Some of us may have done something even like this, like, oh, let's take an average. Obviously, 25%. Yeah, all of those are wrong. So any thoughts about why this might be wrong? Any thoughts about why this is wrong? Well, what is Incorta doing? And this is really important sort of to understand and to relate back to our physical schema derived persistent computed columns, and also to what we can do with a business schema. Essentially, what we're asking Incorta to do with all these calculations are row by row calculations. All right, as you may recall, I'm going to go here and select done in my action bar and just save that change for right now and go back to my schema, bench work, and sales order detail. All right, so when I added these formulas, right, line costs and line profit to my physical schema, these are, and one of the reasons why I call these line totals, what's happening is for every one of these 9 million rows that we have in the sales order detail, right, I'm adding this additional column, right, standard cost from product times the order quantity. That's the order quantity on row 1, right? And on row 2 is another operation and so forth. Right, same things here on line total when we're doing line profit. This is a profit based off of that row, right? Row 1 of 9 million, row 2 of 9 million something, row 3 of 9 million, and so forth, right? So calculations by default, especially and only on physical schemas, are row by row, right? But when I go back here and I go to my sales dashboard and I look at this number back as a sum, and my formula builder, I'm actually performing a row by row calculation, right? So we're doing a calculation of the line profit divided by the line total, right? Oh, I missed how you changed it to 29%. Sure, no worries. Right. All I did is, like, somebody might go, that number is absolutely wrong. I'll do an average, right? That's all. And that's the wrong result. That's all. So it's just a different type of aggregation, right? And the point is, this aggregation is a row by row, right, aggregation, right, of all these results. So line profit divided by line total for row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and then sum up all those calculations. I got 9 million rows, sum up each line of percentage profit, each row of percentage profit. That's how I end up with this big number as a percentage, 259 million, which is totally wrong. If I do an average, the aggregation is like, take all those profit row by row percentages and average them, which is also wrong, right? Oh, how do we change it? Yeah, so, we don't change it to an average. You keep it to, because the number's wrong. It's obviously percentage of revenue as profit is less than 10%, right? It's around 8-point-something%, right? So the number's obviously wrong. So when we look here, whatever it is, I'll just leave this as formula, just leave it as that. And then we'll go into a formula. And what we need to do is an aggregation, right? I need to do, this is a KPI. Give me the sum of line profit. So sum all of those 9 million plus rows up together. Then divide it by the sum. And this is the same thing we would do in Excel, right? Hasn't changed. It's the same type of function, right? Just as you would do in Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. So give me the sum in this case right here. Now, sum is a function. So in the formula builder, you'll see here, I actually have types of functions, my aggregation functions, right? And I'm just using sum. There are other functions as well, if you want to take a look, but we'll touch on later on besides these, but Boolean functions, conditional statements, conversion functions, filtering functions, miscellaneous functions, scalar, arithmetic, date, and string functions, right? For example, if I wanted to concatenate a string or something like that, I could do that, or replace or so forth. But what we wanted was just an aggregation function, right? So sum up all the line profit, sum up all the line total, divide those, right? Click done. Now it shows 9% on my format percentage, 8.78%. That's the correct number. Oh, it's really important to understand when we're dealing with calculations, the base behavior when we're doing like minus, subtract, is a row by row calculation. Now, I can persist, I'll select done here. I can persist as persistent computed columns in a physical schema, as we have here, S30 schema, AdventureWorks. I can, for example, a sales order detail, as long as it's a row by row calculation, as you see here, I can persist it in the physical schema layer. Right? We also demonstrated we can put those row by row calculations in a business schema. But in addition to a business schema, what you can also do here, let me go back to my content tab, to my dashboard. I know I'm zooming around, so just bear with me. I'm going to go back to that sum formula that we had for our profit, profit as a percentage of revenue. I'm going to copy that formula, select done. And now I'm going to go to my business schema, S30 business schema, AdventureWorks sales. For my view sales, I'll go edit. And essentially what I can do is add a new formula. Here in the business schema, under new formula, I can have aggregations, not just row by row calculations. I can have aggregations. Right? So there were some questions about ETL and the like. Right? So where you put your, whether it's ETL or ELT, extract, load, transform, right? Business schemas are a place where you can perform aggregations, right? So here I can put in, profit, percent, revenue, right? Give it a name, and then I could give it a nice label that's easy to understand, like profit, percent, or use a special character, percent of revenue, right? And this is an aggregation. I can put this aggregation here, not just row by row, but in the business schema, you can have aggregated formulas. Right? The runtime calculation, it makes a lot of sense, right? So that we're going to put in place. So I added that to view sales. Go back to my dashboard, VentureWorks sales dashboard. Here in my KPI insight, right now I have profit as a percentage of revenue. See right here, that in here. Shows 0, it's not 0. Oh, right, it's a decimal, right? So go to your format, it's not rounded. So percent, there it is. Profit as a percentage of revenue, right? There it is, 8.78%, and select done. So that was essentially our guided tour, right? As we're rounding it up, around summarizing what happened, right? And the last step that we put in place was this aggregation formula on a business schema. Cost and profit are persisted computed columns, right? Derived columns that exist, actually manifest in the physical snapshot, right? I.e. the backup of the in-memory data map for the physical schema, right? So yeah, save that. And I'll make sure I share this dashboard, share my access to the dashboard with all the students. Okay. And you most certainly can edit the dashboard. Yeah. Share, you gotta click share. You'll see a notification that you shared. This is what we call the notification. Yeah, and then you can click close. Cool. So, you know, the point of this guided tour is really, in terms of a learning outcome or goal, is multiple, right? There are multiple points associated with it. But to understand how data gets loaded, why we need a schema, what we can do at the schema level in terms of adding persistent computed columns, how those calculations need to be implemented. Data getting loaded into Incorta, in the analytics service, how we can use a business view, a business schema to simplify sort of the analysis, also implement a semantic layer, standardize the calculations, and also implement pre-aggregations, right, within that SKU. And all of that was an iterative process, going through essentially the analyzer, right? Build out of formulas, and then figuring out whether we should put those formulas in the business business view in a specific business schema, or to put them back in the schema. Yeah, so you just need to change the format like we did here, as you can see here. Thanks very much for helping everybody out. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you have the answer, feel free. You got a lot of folks with questions. So format, you just said no format, right? Or I think the default was like, it was showing rounded, right, 0, but it's, you want to do percent. Yeah, give it a shot and select done. Cool. And you can take a look at mine if you want. It's been shared with you. Yeah, very good. So that is the iterative nature, and you saw that near the very end, how it's going from the insight to the business schema, to the schema, back again to the business schema, to the insight, and so forth, that iterative process. And you'll find yourself working very much in that way. Okay, we want to spend a couple of minutes here while we have about an hour left, but I do want to spend a couple of minutes reviewing your homework assignment that you did previously, just for some folks who have referenced it. And I'll be very mindful of time as we do this. Again, the recording of this session will be posted as soon as I'm made aware of it to our course player under video, we'll say session 02. So under architecture fundamentals, we had our US states analysis in this lab. I'm not going to go through the lab again, but I'm just going to go through my solution. I won't be sharing that initially with you. I'll share that at the last day of the course. But here we have US state dashboard. But the first one we had to build was called CA Cities dashboard. Very basic, right? CA Cities, if we go edit this, we're just using a business schema that was already created for you. I need to pause for a second. We have this business schema that was already created for you, easy schema, US analysis. That business schema, it comes from a schema called schema, I believe, US analysis. And in this, there's actually two views, a view called US cities and then one called CA cities. So here we have CA cities, right, that is listed here. Row number, right? Row number was just basically count something. Right? Just count one over and over. And then population, you just had to format this field correctly using that formatting setting. One thing you may observe, right, that we can sort here by city name and the row numbers, right? I'm always going to start off with row number 1. I live in Alameda, city in California. So anyhow, city name. Right. So row number is not fixed. So this is kind of a hack. I don't know if there's any value in having that, but that's people always ask. Right. We'd have to persist that type of thing. Run a data load. Okay, so then we had US dashboards, which by far was much more fun to do. Lots of different visualizations, all using essentially the same view. US states. We also have one for VA city. The 483 California cities. Get a drill down. So here in the Properties tab, drill down to the CA Cities dashboard. Let's just look at the behavior real quick. That was one of the first things you need to do. CA Cities. Click on this. It's not really readily evident, right? CA Cities dashboard, like that. That goes to the dashboard. How do I get back? A lot of people will click this arrow. What's that going to do? It's going to take me back to the parent folder, or in this case, either content, or in my case, S30, under the content tab for this dashboard. I click that back arrow, right? So if I go back, it's going to take me to here. So it took me away from my CA Cities dashboard, which was not what I wanted to do, right? So how do you navigate back? Well, CA Cities dashboard and navigate forward. You'll notice here, Incorta, there's like window behind a window icon that's appearing next to the title of the dashboard. Open up that menu. It says, hey, this is where you came from, S30 US dashboard. That's how I get back. Yeah, it's not readily evident. That may change, but that's how you find it right now. So there is a way to get back. Good news. Your KPI is pretty straightforward. State by population, right, as a visualization. Right, this visualization here, again, that you might not readily know. Right, it doesn't say that, hey, this is a tag cloud. Like there's nothing here in Choose a Visualization that shows you the selected visualization that you're looking at when you're editing it. Some people find that a little bit frustrating, but once you're familiar with the visualization, it's pretty evident what it is. This is a tag cloud where you have your abbreviation, basically one dimension and one measure tray. You copy that in your lab, right? You basically use this option to duplicate the state by population, right? Yeah, sure. Someone's asking if I can share this. I'm going to share this. I'll give you the view access for now. And see at least behavior. Absolutely. No worries. Yeah, I'll do that here for CA Cities, sure. Easy to share. Okay, that's fine. All right, no big deal. So anyhow, I'll go back to, oh, there I made my own mistake. Perfect. So you just duplicated this dashboard and basically just changed it, right? Switched out the visualization in this case, right? From tag cloud, right? Tag cloud to, in this case, you just went to bubble. State population and area, right? Pretty straightforward. One of the things you may have noticed here, you can change the format of a measure. Make it scatter, dashed line. Sure. Yeah. So certain visualizations, right? Yeah, certain visualizations allow you to, right, add yeah, for colors, right? We have a hand selected about a colors, right? So under format, you can go into your colors, the hex color, like a web hexadecimal for colors, right? There are ways to configure sort of the preset. Someone's asking, and when I share something, right, will the users see an email notification? Yeah, so this web server doesn't have an email associated with it. I mean, an email server associated. Yeah. So, right. So there is the ability to send a dashboard, right, to somebody, right? So this is more of that type of notification. Like I can send this, I can determine whether this is XSL, SV. I could send it to a group of students, right? Add something like that if I wanted to. It's certainly possible. Okay. State by population, total area in square miles, house and seats, right? The big gotcha here, population, total area, square miles, number of house seats, right? These are 3 measures for this visualization. This visualization is called bubble chart. It's what we saw before related to tag cloud, which was bubble. This is bubble chart. Right? So as I change the order of the measures, I'm basically switching out the axes. So in this case, I have the Y as population, house seat as the X, and then the thing that I'm showing in terms of the circumference or the shape of the circle here is total square miles. I can switch it out with population, right, and switching out the X again. Yeah. Okay. So different visualizations, right, different measures. U.S. population, right, we're taking a look at this. Under state, there's a configuration. So this could be for country, right, so the world, we could set this to. So if we have sales around the world, you can have that. We don't, if you want to add and use these other sort of charts, whether this makes sense or not is kind of questionable, but, right, just zoom in. And basically, we're looking for that country dimension then. Right, so you need to have that looked up. So Georgia with $10 million in sales is unfortunate, right, with this map. But this map is saying Georgia as a state, but our visualization is showing Georgia, the country. Yeah. So if you want to use different type of map, that's certainly possible. This is a nice little segue into the admin screen for Incorta. Right, so if you want to do this under state, you wanted to use, right, Apple Maps, Google Maps, where you had latitude, longitude, or in a specific address, that's certainly possible. So this is a nice segue over. So I'm going to go over to what's known as the admin screen here for Incorta. Oh, Incorta admin. You guys don't have access to this. But essentially, if you do have access to an admin screen on your own Incorta instance or the like, it's basically your website URL or DNS or IP address. Default is 8080 Incorta admin with your administrative credentials. There is online help here, which is very, very good. If you want to take a look at it, help. It describes basically all the fields in the admin interface. It's really fantastic. It's built right in here, very clean, very easy to understand. So essentially, when we're looking at sort of, when we're talking about UI customizations or just different clustering interface or SQL interface, but for default tenant configurations, right, we have here under integration, where we would be able to put into place our Google Maps API key, our Apple Maps developer team ID. And these are API requests. So typically, if you're behind a DMZ, right, this may or may not work. DMZ being you have an on-premises installation, or even if you're in cloud, you're behind some firewall, right? You have to be able to make sure you pipe out through the given ports for these services. And these services may incur costs, right? So whether you have typically a threshold for every type of request per hour. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but typically that's how that works. You have a daily limit or something, or peak limit or like. But you can supply these in, play around with them if you sign up for those types of IDs and so forth. You just specify this here. There are other configuration settings as well that here in our integration, but this is where you define as an administrator those Google Maps and Apple Maps IDs. Right, that would empower those visualizations. I don't have that set up yet, so I don't have that option. So I can at least at this point. Okay, so I'm going to sign in again. Thank you. Cool. So what else do we have here that's important? Well, there's a lot that's important in this exercise, and really one of the reasons why you should be doing it as we go through, besides playing around the maps, some other common configurations like, hey, how do I do the top 10 of something? Well, this was a bar chart, right, where we were showing population by state. In the action bar, there's the gear icon for settings, and this bar chart allows us to show a maximum number of rows. And we're just showing by the grouping dimension a filter by population in descending order or ascending order. And then we're limiting by 10. Okay. So in your lab, you just duplicated that, and then you added here the ascending order, and you changed the color. And then we have state details, right? Well, the last thing we had to do here was for state, at least on adding our insights, was clicks. So for example, to Wikipedia, this is sort of adding a URL, right, path for a given field. So if a user clicks on this, right, they'll go to Wikipedia wiki, and then this syntax here, right, within the curly braces is basically saying, take this given field and whatever its value, and we'll append it, right, to what we described the URL. So if you wanted to pass in a query string or the like, you certainly can. So in this case, we have business schema, US analysis, US state. Now, there are some trade-offs to this you may have noticed, right? So as I go here, done, and I select California, perfect. I open a new tab, opens up Wikipedia, and this builds, concatenates the string, right, from the source URL to that literal California. But if I go to a state with two names, New Hampshire, we'll see that Wikipedia, we still go to Wikipedia, but Wikipedia doesn't understand how Incorta replaced the space in New Hampshire, the string, with a plus sign. Incorta made a decision about encoding this URL with that space to handle the space gracefully. Typically spaces in URLs, right, per the web standards are like %20 or something, right? But that gets resolved by Wikipedia as an underscore. There's no way for me to add a formula in that URL builder, so I'd have to go down to like the business schema label and either add a %20 with replace concatenation string or something like that, or replace space with an underscore, get that to work. And unfortunately, that would have to actually show in the data, right? So, there might be some other ways to sort of hack it, but that's initially one of the trade-offs here. So if you didn't notice that, that's a gotcha here. Yeah, there's a question about the bubble chart, right? Do we determine the size? No. Right, so a lot of things you don't get to determine in Incorta, right? So if you wanted to change a scale, like millions or something like that, it's just not going to do anything, right? Thousands or percentages, right? Just ignoring you. Right, so sometimes you'll have that option, yeah. So, hey. Yeah, it's determining how to lay this out. Everything is being determined by Incorta for dynamic layout, right? Yeah, there's not many options are basically knobs we get to play with. Now, what's more interesting about this? Well, what's more interesting about this was the filters that you had to put in place, right? So for example, here, even though I have all these different, state, abbreviation, capital, largest city, population, so forth, these dimensions exposed. When I go to filter, I don't have necessarily all of those exposed, right? Population, house number, seats, capital, state, total square area miles. These were pre-configured sort of what I can filter on, and population in particular, right, that I could say here that these pre-selected values, click apply. Now I've limited or filtered based off of this population size. So how did we implement those types of filters? Well, we did it in this lab, and this brings us our segue to filters and prompts. Here in the action bar, in the More menu, you can select Manage Filters and Prompts. And we're introduced to these dashboard filters constructs. One is called prompts, one is called applied filters, and the other is called presentation variables. And there are lots of cool things that we can do with all of these, right? And I know some of us are less concerned about this because we're just focused on administration or just schema development. Not everybody's focused on really as a reports developer, BI developer on reports development. So that said, it's important to sort of understand the various types of filters in Incorta, and understanding dashboard filters is certainly one of them. You'll see there are things that we can do like runtime filters for security on a schema in filter, right? So understanding filters, again, mastery of filters is certainly key with working in Incorta. And we're just only going to be able to do really a high-level survey of the various types of filters that we can do in Incorta, at least in this course. But it's, I feel, enough to give you a foundation to get going. So prompts, that's our default, applied filters and presentation variables. So we'll start with prompts. What we're seeing here, state, capital, total square area miles, number of house seats. If I remove house seats, select done, I no longer have house seats here in a filter option, or for search. I type in a number like 34. It's like, I don't know what we have in California, 435 or something. Doesn't show up, right? I have to do like a state capital, like Sacramento, or state. That's what my filter options are. State, capital, and total square area miles with big number, right? So prompts dictate what we can filter by. I can add it back in. What was it? House. Where of house? Click done. See, there it is. Okay. Prompts basically determine what we can filter by for our business users and analysts. So if you want to control that, you do that for the dashboard filters using prompt. And there are settings for prompts, as you can see here in the properties menu, right? So for state, for example, I can make this a default filter. And then I have to specify a value. So specify here, default filter, and then it says you got to specify a value. So in this case, I can say select none, or I can say select all, or I can add in a value to search for, like California, or I can add in my other value, for example, none, right? Add that in or something. But in this case, let's say California and Southern Carolina and North Carolina. Now, in is coming from the operation of that filter, as you see here, state in. So that operator could be equals or does not equal or less than or greater than, whatever makes sense, right? Not in or starts with or ends with, right? Or contains this string or does not contain. Is dependent, has to deal with hierarchical data. We'll touch on that tomorrow, real edge case. But anyhow, yeah, so it starts with, doesn't start with, whatever it might be, right? There are different options here. So we said in, so to speak, right? So whatever this list in this array, essentially. So select done. So default filter now. I may not apply. This is a gotcha. So if you're playing around with this, set my default filter. I'll go here. I select in, select California. I'll just select these three. And then you have to actually select here filter. Click save. You have to set the filter, right? It doesn't say save here in this. So once I've done it, it's good. It's a select the filter. Now I've done it. Click done to save those changes. So now I have my preset filter, Arizona, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. This is a default filter, which means I can get rid of it. I can clear it out, right? Now, if I go back to my content to my favorite dashboard, this time it's what is this, US analysis. So let's get rid of this one. Make US analysis my favorite. There we go. Go in here. And now you can see Alaska, Arizona, and so forth. It's my default filter. So I'm only setting for 50 Nifty for the 50 Nifty United States. So I can remove that, clear it out, and then I'll see my 50. Back under Manage Filters and Prompts in the action bar, more options menu. Let's take a look here. Under State, I can make this a mandatory filter. When I make this a mandatory filter, what we're basically saying, the default filter cannot be removed as a filter setting. I can change it. It doesn't have to be, just Alaska or Arizona. It can be something like this. I can say it doesn't have to be those values, but I can't remove the filter itself. Notice there's no clear filter button, right? I go in and say, oh, for state, let's select all, yeah, apply. But if I deselect all, right, notice that the apply button is grayed out. This is a mandatory filter. I have to have a state filter. It has to be all, it has to be something, right? I can't remove it. So that behavior is can be a little hard or challenging for people to understand. Yeah, hierarchies for something else. So cool. We'll touch on that later on. So under Manage Filters and Prompts, in addition to that, I think everybody gets how this is being controlled. So we'll just turn these off. Then we have something called an applied filter. So this is interesting. This applied filter, we're basically going to apply to the whole entire dashboard. And this one was basically for population, right? And we had a comparison greater than or equals to as an operator. And we implemented something called PV_population. Now, this syntax using the $sign, in this case, refers to a variable in Incorta. And there are two different there are three types of variables, I would say, in Incorta, right? More if we want to be very specific, but generally the one that we're working with is a presentation variable. Then there's something called system variables, or you might call global variables. And then we have what we call session variables, and session variables can be divided into external, internal, and filters. So anyhow, they're categorized that way. So here we have presentation variables. A presentation variable allows for a user to interact with a dashboard by submitting their own values, right? Not just basically with the pre-selected, and it gives us a lot of different options for how we can expose data as a reports developer, how we can build sort of like goals or scenario type dashboards as well. We can use presentation variables in a condition statement, essentially to show this column or that column based off of the setting in a presentation variable and so forth. So there's a lot of runway with presentation variables. So let's take a look. So here's a presentation variable. To add the presentation variable, we simply drag and drop new variable to the presentation variable tray in this case. That's what we did for population. So let's take a quick look at it. This was our display name greater than or equal to population. I use the naming convention PV to indicate this was a presentation variable population. The data type is a long, and then this field was optional. Drag and drop an element field for the user to select for. In this case was the population field itself. But I'll just remove that for right now, and I'll select done. Now that presentation variable, as we select done here, allows a user when I select population to enter a value. Now, if I don't have a list of values to pre-select from here, a business user needs to be savvy enough to know that here under this plus, I have to enter in a value, like for example, 1 million. Click plus, add it to my list. Now click apply. Now, how does that value get applied, right, to the dashboard? How do I limit this now or filter this based off of population greater than 1 million? That happened through an applied filter. So here we have an applied filter, and we referenced, I edit this operator value, we reference that what the user's entry is, PV population, this presentation variable, and we do that with a $sign. And if you tried to do this on your own, edit this operator, this may have been really tricky. So I'm just going to choose one of these values just to show you how it's done. A lot of people have struggled with this step, and it's a gotcha. And then your presentation variable doesn't seem to do anything. So this applied filter right here, we're applying the presentation variable. Greater than or equals to, you might have gotten as the operator, right? Greater than or equal to. But adding that presentation variable, notice it's not in the list of population values because it's user entered. Here in search and add in this text box, you have to type in PV population. There's no other way to do it, at least in this version of Incorta. Hit enter to get that to set. And now I have PV right here, this population, greater than or equal to this setting, right? Relation. And you have to see that being selected, right? You had to type it in, the name of the filter, and select them. Right? And now we can apply this filter. If you're not applying the filter, it doesn't come into place. And it comes, right? If I want to have a pre-selected, these options for what users can select, this can be any field. It doesn't have to come from this schema. It could have like a lookup table schema. You see that later on. That. Very good. Cool. All right. That's how we work through that lab. So that brings up some things that we have that I want to share with you that are a little more specific to working with reports. And I'm going to start sharing some content that we have, namely dashboard and schemas. So just I'm going to pause real briefly and have to go behind the scenes as the administrator user or super user to share some things with you. Let me just do that real quickly so I can load the proper schemas and give me a second. So I'm going to pause. Okay, so I'd like you to go back to your content tab now. And you should see a new folder called S0 presentation variables. Yeah, so let's take a look. So I'm going to go to presentation variables, it's listed here, and we open those up. I'm going to be loading. We're going to start off with budget version. Right. So let's click on budget version. So what does this error mean? Folks should be able to know what this error means. We talked about this initially. Right, so this means as we take a look here, the IO error while reading snapshot data, right? That basically means, or probably our snapshot, right, our direct data map has not been, our schema has not been loaded with data and it hasn't been allowed, or for whatever reason, the analytics service was not able to load it, right? So, yeah, so this requires some schemas. Now, if you're trying to edit this, which you have the ability to do so, I'm gonna show you sort of a trick. What you can do as we're looking at S0 budget version, make a copy of this. So in the action bar, while I'm loading the data, make a copy, right? And so in the More menu, make a copy, and just simply name this after your student user. And if you haven't created a folder account, make one. So I'm gonna put it here under S30, and add a new folder. S30 budget version. So it's my version. I'm going to say copy and open. Yeah, so that way we don't lose it, right? So you can make a copy of it, right? So it's opened up. Yeah, just again, make a copy. Yeah, make your own copy. Cool. So, all right, we'll take a look here. There are a couple of things here that I have to do. How can we figure out what the schema is? Just look here, edit. We have date, right? You're seeing an error that you don't have access to one of these schema. It's not the most friendliest error, but we'll see it here in the data panel. So one is slookup, right? I'm pretty sure I shared that with you. Let me see if I do it. I haven't. I'm going to add both of these schemas and load the data. That's one. And the other schema was one called sales to, right? Sales to. So I'm going to share that with you. You're not seeing me share. I'm doing this on another screen. Just mediate this. Yeah, you'll see it come in and I'll load the data. Yeah, let's do that. Sure. So refresh. Yeah. All right, so just give it a second. I'm not seeing that error anymore, so you have access to both of these schemas, SC lookup, and refresh one time. I'll cancel, and I'll do it one more time. Ah, there's the data, so it's all been loaded up. So let's take a look real quick here. Right, this is our what if budget version. We have a presentation variable called budget version. Oh, and somebody may have deleted this. That's okay. That's right, budget version. We can apply this. So this budget version is interesting. This budget version is essentially coming from this lookup here, right, as a presentation variable. He's showing up. And it's basically saying this lookup, right, this field here, budget version 1 or 2, is popping up. I'm going to select done and done. There it goes. For whatever reason, it wasn't showing up. I had to get out of it, went into edit. But here it is, the presentation variable 1 and 2. You might have to do that yourself. Oh, how is this working? So when I select 1, which is the default, and when I select 2, take a look at the budget column and apply budget version 2, and the numbers changed. So first of which, right, taking a look at the presentation variable. The presentation variable is really straightforward. I can remove this here, but budget version is just going to be called variable budget, right? That's going to be your name. And we were choosing that the numbers for folks to choose from 1 or 2. It's actually coming from a schema called lookup, from a table called lookup, where I have just different columns with all types of different lookups. This is a very common technique in Incorta. Oh, you can do an aggregation in a lookup. Like, what do you want to do, business user? Which budget version do you want? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? Here's a column called lookup, whatever these values are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or I have lookup 1, right? Subcategory, product, year, category, right? So just different ways that you can populate the presentation variables, the field values. Give me the previous 30 days and the next 90 days I'd like, right? This one was budget version, just drag that out. All that was done here. Select done and done again. All right, so our budget version. So what happens here in the insight when I select from budget version 1 to budget version 2? Let's take a look and edit this insight, and we'll take a look. Here under budget, what is budget? Well, budget's a formula. Let's take a look at this formula. This formula is saying for the presentation variable budget. Well, how did we reference that? Well, lo and behold, here in the formula builder, we were looking at functions earlier. For example, condition statement. You have an if or a case, right? And then here we have variables. Now, remember, I mentioned that we have some internal variables, which I would call either global variables or system variables that are based off of your session, right? Current day or the like. And then we have something else called session variables that we'll touch on tomorrow, I believe, depending on how fast we're going through all this. But yeah, so but here's our budget. That's our presentation variable. It's showing right here, and so it's accessible in that manner. It's been exposed to us that way. So this is saying if the user selects 1, what are we going to do? Well, from the sales to schema, we'll show you this field, budget 1. If it's not 1, we're going to show you budget 2. This could be a case statement or anything, but basically what this is a column selector, right? That's how this is operating, as a column selector. So just take a moment to look at that presentation variable and how that's functioning. That's done. Let's go back to our content tab. Under S0 presentation variables. Open it up again. Right. Now I'm going to see here S0 multiplier. I'm going to make just a copy of this. So notice on the card, I can make a copy, or from a list view, I can make a copy. This I'm looking at is multiplier. Make a copy. I'm going to put it in my folder, S30. I'm going to call my copy of this S30. Right, I have that to work off of. And then I'm just going to say copy and open. There we go. Oh, here's a multiplier presentation variable, right? So this case, it's only showing one, like a default value. So I would have to enter it as a business user, like 1.5, and click plus as my new selection, and plus add. Right? And that's changing, right, as a multiplier in this case, what my formulas are. Like if the cost is this, then the profit is this, right? So some type of multiplier that's being used on either revenue or costs or like, and we can see that here on the insight. We'll edit the insight. What type of insight is this where we're doing these calculations? Anyone want to take a gander? An aggregated table, an aggregated table. And actually a details table, an aggregated table, right? They're basically the same thing except for this toggle. Yep. Yeah, totally. So here we can see for category, right? Product category, those are group bys for aggregation, right? And here we see for profit. There's our calculation, so that's a formula. And then here we have if cost is another formula. So if the cost of goods times, in this case, our presentation variable called PM, right? And that would be in our list of variables, right? You might not see it right away because it's called PM, so there it is. Yeah. And then we'd have our other then profit is, right? Amount sold minus the sum of this, right? Like that. So that's how presentation variables, two basic ways how presentation variables can be applied or used. One we saw as a column selector, right? In terms of an insight, we've seen as a dashboard filter. What was in our lab that we had before, right? So pretty powerful. So we could do something like a what if analysis. Let me load up that schema for us and share it with you. So in your presentation variables folder, make a copy of the what if analysis. Do that in just a moment myself. So under content, your presentation variable, I have my what if analysis. Someone's already made a copy. I'm going to select mine. Thank you for making a copy. I really appreciate that. Make a copy in the action bar in the more options menu. I'm going to just say make a copy. I'm going to put it in my S30 folder, and I'm going to call this S30 what if analysis. Yeah, copy and open. Cool. So here we have two presentation variables. You can see this under manage filters and prompt, the action bar, and then more options menu. Then in dashboard filters, presentation variables as selection. And one is called SC, and the other is called MC. Well, here we have some default values for both 3 or 2, and you can change those. I'm going to select cancel. All right, so here are the actuals. As I change these values, again, you have to edit these. Maybe I'll make this 11% increase. Right? There you go, our profit went up. These calculations here are my sales percentage. Maybe this went up to, 36%. We can say something like that. Right? Now I have this new profit range. So here's the originals, the actuals. This is the what if. So that's that idea of having like a scenario builder or goal builder or the like, right? Yeah. Let's edit. How do you get these totals here? Yeah, you can do that even for details. Sure. Right? Yeah. just select total or subtotal. Yeah. If you don't want something to be totaled, you can basically say, I don't want to aggregate this field. And it won't. Right. Sure. So yeah, that's what it's showing, our total expenses, right? So total expenses is this calculation. It's using MC in it, right? Marketing being an expense. I have one more schema I'm going to share with you here in that regard. We'll take a look at the last example. I'm going to be sharing some more examples with you tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Yeah, no worries. So back here under content, yeah, and you can modify these, play with these, make a copy, right? Presentation of variable. So what's another one that we have here under presentation variables that we looked at? It was presentation variables in a filter. Look at this one. Yeah, right. So here we have year, category electronics, and none, a couple of different insights, right? You can change revenue by product. So these settings here, category, product, so forth, right? Under manage filters and prompts. And we have a presentation variable for year, right? That's been listed. And we're using as our field optional calendar year. We call this PV year. I have PV category, and I have PV products. Notice there's not an applied filter here for these, right? So as a setting, right? Here are the selections. I want to say, oh, I want the digital camera. I could select apply, right? So I can see here these quantities, and let me just lay out this. I'd want it to. Right, it's filtering these. Yeah. So what's happening is for each one of these individual insights, we're applying a filter, right? So distinguish between what's going on, right? Previously in our lab, managed filters and prompts, we were using something like a presentation variable as an applied filter for the whole dashboard setting, right? But you can also filter individual insights. So for example, here, revenue by product, right? Rather than just within here, you know, calculation. Here we have our product name. Notice here in our edit insight, in our action bar for the edit insight, you can see we have a filter icon. It's selected, and we're using a formula. So this filter individual values for this insight is basically it's basically a where predicate clause filter, right? Yeah, row by row filter. So we're saying in this case this type of filter formula, right? Which is fun. So PV product. So if the product equals none, right? If that's the condition, right? Or the product is equaling this. So based off of that filter selection. Here we've specified none, or we have basically PV product. What you're selected gets applied. So one of these conditions, being true, is the filter that we're going to apply. Right. So here I had my product category being applied. Yeah, so that's an interesting observation, right? This idea where you'd have to like type in none, the all, right? Yeah, sure. So here, yeah, there are a couple of ways we could do that, like with a lookup field, like add that. Same thing here with our product categories, like electronics. If you want to see revenue by year, in this case, revenue by category for, right, take a look at that. Again, we're applying a filter product category in this case, right? And we're basically saying, hey, for product category, it needs to match this, right? It's in this value. That one's a little more simple. Again, a where clause. And then same thing here for year, for revenue by year. Calendar year, EB year. Excellent. So those are presentation variables. Tomorrow we're going to spend some time talking about session variables. I have a lot of session variables I'm going to share with you, the whole list and how session variables can be used as well. But you're already seeing some here highlighted, like within date. You're certainly seeing some that are listed that are system variables, or global variables, so to speak, that are available to everyone in the builder. But I want to talk a little bit more about sort of joins, and a couple other things while we have a couple of minutes. So I'm actually going to go back to a schema that we started off with called our sales schema. That was our first schema that we looked at. Moving off from presentation variables again, I've shared that content that was in that formula, and then we're going to spend just a couple of minutes here as we're wrapping up this second session of Incorta for virtual training fundamentals for administrators and developers. I think will be helpful. So feel free to follow along with me if you like in the sales schema. Yeah, and I'm basically going to, we all have access to that to explore data. So the first of which here, I'm not going to look at date. I'm going to switch my visualization in the action bar, select the chart icon, and I'm going to choose my visualization just to table detail. So a couple of different things. So first of which, remember here we have sales, right? Let's say I just want to bring out here, I just want to show you a couple of things. The sales table, right? I can add everything from the sales table here. That's my 900,000 rows or the large. Well, a couple of things I wanted to share with you in the analyzer view, especially with table as a visualization. Just give me that transactional raw table, see it in place. First of which, in under exploring data in my action bar, you can see here two different items, right? We saw a filter initially, so I can apply filters like a distinct filter, individual value filters, like where cost is above, like a certain level or number and so forth, right? I also can apply a sort that I want to sort by, for example, cost, right? And this would basically translate into an order by statement, right? For example, and we can see that like these basic filters, if I want to do here, I want to do product ID, do this, for example, product ID is in like a list of something, right? And filter. Right, okay, so I have an order and I have a filter, right? So that's basically a where clause that's been added to this, as well as an order by statement. And we can actually see this in our SQL. Now this is reference SQL. This is reference SQL. And you can see here we have some type of add days calculation here. So that's being expressed in SQL. And we have our schema as a three-part, columns as a three-part name, sales, it's a sales schema, sales table, and then the column customer ID. And it's been aliased as customer ID, as month, and so forth. And here's my where clause that we specified, where the product ID is in 16 and 17, and the order by is cost of goods ascending. Now, you're not always going to see the reference SQL, like it's not always exposed, even though SQL may show there because it's that visualization type. But if you have an additional aggregation, like it might be too complicated. But in certain cases, you can actually copy this SQL. And then I'm going to make an attempt. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to make an attempt using a tool, this case called pSQL. So let me quit out of this and try to open this again. pSQL is one of those optional downloads that I had. You can use DB Visualizer, but it's a Postgres SQL client. And why is that important, you're saying? So just back to our architecture diagram very quickly. Let me close out Wikipedia. We don't need to see that. So architecture diagram, right? As we were mentioning a little bit earlier, we're going through a guided walk tour. These other tools, right, connect like Power BI, MicroStrategy, Tableau, and other systems can talk to Incorta as a data warehouse through the Postgres SQL interface. Right? And that's what I'm making a connection to doing here, right? So I'm basically saying, hey, this is my host address, this is my user, this is my username, here's my password. My database is the name of the tenant, connect. What am I looking at? I'm looking at the sales schema of my query tab. go in here, have a query, right? And I should probably check, right, how much data came back in from Incorta when I was doing this. Let's take a look here, cancel, right? It's only 13,000 rows, so it's not that bad. If I had like a million rows, you know, my client's gonna run, but I can run this query. And there we go. So this might take a little bit longer to run, right? Because I have to go through this client. But basically, this is how you can use Incorta, right? Just remember, Incorta is exposed just not to the visualizer analytics, but to this whole other ecosystem, right, that's available to us, right? Power BI, MicroStrategy, Tableau, as long as we're going to the PostgreSQL interface. Now, there's certain types of query shapes that we don't support. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow when we review joins, and we're going to do a schema design process. And we'll mention in doing that Spark, right? Spark has a place if it's added into Incorta standalone, or which is by default an installation option, or it can be its own cluster. But if we can't handle it internally in terms of Incorta's sort of SQL compliance, so to speak, for ANSI SQL with its in-memory direct data map engine, we'll send it to Spark, and Spark will read the Parquet file. So that's a whole opportunity for advanced analytics. Additionally, you know, for machine learning or like adding a notebook. So there's a lot that you can do with this. But standard tools will use that Postgres connection, right? And just like I did this P-SQL client, run that. That's one of the things I wanted to share with you. SQL. Okay, so speaking of sharing with you, I have another lab for you to do that should be available, and I'll bring this up a little bit higher in our course player. So I'm going to ask you to refresh your course player in just a moment here. But let me just move this. Okay, cool. So go back to your course player, learn Incorta, right, and refresh your course player. And I've moved it around. So under you can mark off if you completed the walkthrough. We talked about most of these topics. We'll be talking a couple more of these. So I'm going to mark it off as next. U.S. states analysis, I've already showed that is completed, right? So hands-on Incorta build case study. Somebody's asking, can we also create a temporary table in Incorta? Not in the traditional sense of a temporary table as you view it. You can create essentially a static table, right, that you materialize in Incorta, yeah, upon a data load. So if you're loading data frequently, it will serve as like a temp table. But yeah, there's certain things that you would want to do in SQL that you're not necessarily going to be able to easily do in Incorta, right, per standard. And a lot of these third-party tools do things like make them tables. Yeah. But business schemas can work in that regard, right, as a runtime view of a data, right? So there's some workarounds. And we'll look at those, as well as building or creating materialized views with Spark. We'll look at those tomorrow. But in the meantime, what I'd like you to do, everybody who's enrolled in the course, as your next homework assignment, do this lab, the 4-3 lab Thrive Beverage Company case study. And this is going to require for me to create, or at least here, I'll start this for you. I have to add here, and you're again, just like as you did before, the training at Incorta. Essentially here, I have to add a data source for you. And this data source, you're going to build a schema off of. The data source is going to be called DSTDC. So I'm doing that now. And essentially, this is, again, a MySQL database that's just on my host. And it's similar to AdventureWorks that we had, but this is about selling of beverages, non-alcoholic beverages. Hopefully, it's okay with everybody. So I'll make that connection and make that available to you as we speak. We're going through it, but you're going to create in this lab, you'll focus mostly on, in this case, building out a business schema. That's what you start with, right? Use your naming convention, because we can only, for a given tenant, have unique names for business schemas and schemas. I'll make sure that this is working. And I'll share that with all students. So you'll see this now, this data source. This data source, if you go back to your Incorta site, I'm going to just take example this real quick. Available under data source TB. That's what your lab is going to ask you to do. And just follow the instructions. So schema names are unique. You're going to use the schema wizard, right? Load data, take a look at loading data, and then you're going to create a business schema. If you get lost in the lab, you can always use sort of the lab itself, its own table of contents that you have here, right? Own table of contents that you can navigate to. But very much like what you had before, once you build your business schema, I'll just highlight it, you're going to break your business schema into multiple views, like a dimension view, a calculations view, right? As well as a measures view. So a different way of kind of representing schemas, breaking it out, making it really easy for a business user to navigate and to use. You're going to build two dashboards, regional dashboard. If you're feeling up to the challenge and don't want the direct instruction, awesome. If you just want to look at the dashboard and use the hints, right, go ahead, right, and try to build it yourself, right? So there's some hints about how to do things. You'll see a hint. So if you want to take on that challenge, do it yourself. But if you don't, you want the direct instruction, like how to do it, you need that confidence, that's okay, no worries, right? Don't have to go through all that, right? So we'll show you how to build out each individual insight by title, right? Same thing, we have a parent dashboard, another one is a challenge here that you can build out, very much like what we did earlier in the US analysis. So you probably will be able to figure out really quickly. Sales by region by month, for example, too. So this is your lab, extra time building out visualizations, playing around with some formulas. Probably won't take you as much time as it did the first one because it's the second time around, and we'll spend just about 10 minutes reviewing that. I won't go into too much in tomorrow's session. And that brings us to the end of our session today. I wanted to thank everybody for the opportunity to deliver our virtual training. We really do appreciate it. And we value you as both a customer and a partner. I'll make the recording available as soon as I receive that information from Zoom, right here under details in downloads, video session 01. I wanted to bring to your attention too, if you, for whatever reason, as we mentioned earlier, if you had some issues or challenges with enrolling in this course, you have access to the Google Sheet, please put down here in column G your email address. That will help identify who you are for registration, and I'll reach out to the managers who shared those enrollment links. Otherwise, internally in Incorta, we'll be making decisions about folks who jumped on a virtual meeting call who didn't receive an enrollment link and aren't really enrolled, right? So we do have, unfortunately, some limitations. We have to have everyone go through learn.incorta.com through that enrollment process. We have our own internal processes and procedures and consistency and actually US state law regulations that require that. So if you're not part of that enrollment process and you just joined a virtual meeting link, and you don't put your name down here in this Google Sheet with your email address, we're basically going to be making a decision for you. And essentially what that might mean is that you lose your student user account. I know that's unfortunate. So please do that so you have a say in what happens, right? So anyhow, that's all I can say about that. But outside of that, it's been my pleasure. I'll post that recording as soon as possible. If you have any other additional questions, please let me know. And so forth. Thanks, everybody. Okay, cheers. All right, with that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye. I'm going to end the recording now. Yeah, thank you. The meeting details are available for tomorrow. That's right, in the course player. Thanks. And we're probably going to change those. So I'll send out a note to people on the list. Yeah, who are registered for the course. Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye.